I haven't. I didn't get anything from them either. We'll give it another minute or two and see if we can get the rest of the board here. Yeah, why don't we get those taken care of? Okay, it is 7 o'clock. It is July 27th, 2022. Welcome to the Town of Chelmsford Planning Board meeting. We are doing this in person. We also have an online presence, a Zoom presence. Let me note that although we welcome people coming in that way, if something were to go technically wrong, that would not stop the meeting. So, with that said, and we are, of course, on Chelmsford Telemedia. With that said, let's get to the public input session. We do have a public input session here at the beginning of the meeting. If you've got any matter that's not being covered by other actions that we're taking tonight, feel free to say a word. Oh, hi, Brian.
Good evening. Brian Latine, I'm a town meeting rep, Precinct 9. Been doing this for about 30 years. And I was here on June 22nd, and I made some statements regarding some warehousing. I hope it doesn't step over your requirement not to talk about some of those issues. The reason I'd like to talk about June 22nd is because after I left the meeting, there was a statement made by the community development director that there were a lot of misstatements in what was said, and I'd like to formally ask the planning board to please document what the misstatements were that I or Mr. Thoren made regarding town meeting, overlay districts, warehousing, and the other statements that I made. The concerning part to me was that our planning board is a highly specialized elected board. And when I hear from different town meeting employees, I know that they're not elected, but you're highly dependent on them, my view of the past few years. This kind of separates the planning board from its judicial duties and responsibilities as written in the charter, because you're supposed to be independent. And if you're connected to a town employee who's connected to the town administration, and that same employee is in the ZBA boards and on the meetings and then does the planning board presentation to town meeting, I'm feeling that the planning board isn't the one that I'm being represented by. And the other night was a case in point for that, because after I left, the statement was made that made me feel like I was called a liar, or I didn't know what I had seen at town meeting. I didn't understand the presentation. That was not pictures that I mentioned in that meeting were not pictures of warehouses, and I made that statement. I don't know if that was part of it. The conversation that was interrupted as I was speaking without being recognized, the other speaker speaking, interrupting my talk during the open meeting portion, wasn't recognized by the chair. You're supposed to recognize who's speaking and then stop other people from jumping in. And one of the statements there was that it was regarding taxes, and I was concerned about a particular project that was on that agenda. Unfortunately, that evening, we also did not have an open session at the beginning of the meeting. I don't know if that was just me not understanding that it was made or it wasn't made. So I did my discussion during the agenda item, and I brought in a couple of other projects that I mentioned, and it was I was getting some scowls from the planning board, different members, and those are visible on that video. You can watch it, you can hear what I said, and you can see where I'm concerned about what was said after I left that discussion. In any event, when a town meeting member is elected, they're responsible for their precinct and the town, just like you are. When someone is hired to the town, they're responsible and paid by the town. Who is the town? It isn't the administration. It isn't you, except individually as residents. The town in our charter are the residents of Chelmsford. This is who you represent. Not the developers that want to move into town. God bless them for coming into town wanting to move here. We love that. But you are responsible to the town, the residents. So when I asked a tax question, it was kind of poo-pooed a bit. I was interrupted and told that what was said in a previous meeting wasn't correct, that when you build a warehouse where there's an existing office building, correct, that when you build a warehouse where there's an existing office building with perhaps 100 people, in fact, the chair mentioned that they had worked in the building that was under discussion.
Yeah, indeed I did.
And that bothered me after 65 man-years of board experience myself, including 12 as chairman of a board, volunteer board. I was a little concerned that I think I would have to recuse myself if I had worked in a building that was arguably in front of me at that point. Just concerned about the ethics and the view of it. But the tax portion was, well, no, the taxes in the first discussion was the office building is not tax valuable as a warehouse, whatever that warehouse might be. It's actually neutral. That wasn't what was said in the previous meeting. So I'd love this board to go back and look at the points that I asked, find out which ones were misstatements on my part. I'll apologize in advance for those, and document the ones that were true.
I'll tell you what, why don't you pop me an email if you can list some of those, and I'll go back and have a look.
Okay, it's right on the video.
Yeah, but if you point me to the particular
Yep, the
things you have
statement
concerns
by your
over, I'll have a
expert-
look.
The statement by your expert neutralized what this town meeting rep, or perhaps Mr. Thorne, had said. So I would challenge you folks to do my job for me, if you will. I guess I'm responsible for looking up the video and giving a transcript. I'd be happy to do that. And I'd like the misstatements to be documented and the correct numbers to be there. You tell me what a warehouse at 270, or let's pick
Well,
5 warehouses on the board.
we're getting a little
Okay,
close
sorry.
to something that's on the
Sorry, okay.
agenda tonight.
You
so.
tell me what the tax ramifications are, because when you do a special permit, you're required on that application as a developer to give you economic impact, the impact on the civics of the area. What the impact is, let's pick an earlier one. The minor addition to the building at 200 Mill Road. Minor addition had a second story put in and 7 times atmospheric vacuum extraction systems done. That is not a minor addition. 85,000 gallon tanks worth of acetone. That is not a minor addition. Those are issues that we brought up, and we were told that no public input was required because the application was for a minor addition.
minor, indeed
These are
it was.
mistakes that human beings make during the middle of COVID, Zoom meetings and all. As a town meeting rep, when I sent in those letters that we wrote at that time, they were kind of pushed aside, no public input required. We now have a huge chemical building in our town that is a quarter mile from my house, 300 feet from a 40B project that was built in our town, and I'm very concerned in the issues like this that come up, that a town meeting rep or a representative of the public of the town comes to you and asks you questions. And I'd like to part company here and tell you one of the other things that I heard in a previous meeting to this one that I'm complaining about here. We were told by the community development director that none of the comments that the public or questions the public has to the board during this public input session are relevant or required to have the developer answer unless you ask that question of that developer. I've been doing this for 30 plus years as a resident. Boy, was that a shock to me that nothing I say here does that developer have to do or react to unless you ask them?
That was probably correct.
I would.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
I
was a
would.
surprise, I gather.
I would really appreciate it every time somebody asks a good question here, like traffic or trucks
Yeah.
or overlay district, that you ask the developer going forward, because I thought, doing this for 30 years, 65 years board experience, man years experience, I was shocked at that. So I appreciate you being an independent board. I appreciate what you do and the volunteer work necessary to do it. But please represent us 100% of the time. And the developers are coming into my town, coming into my neighborhood, coming up my street, whenever you make a decision. At the end of my street, you had a property put in there with 6 variances. Every one of them was violated. And to this day, if we weren't in the middle of a drought, like we were last year when we had rain, water's running out of that property down the street, and you wrote a special permit that said, no water is to leave that property. It's destroyed a wetlands just 200 yards away, and the Conservation Commission doesn't have to deal with it because they only deal with 100 yards away. I find these little mistakes to be dramatic to us as residents, and I appreciate you
Okay,
doing what
well, thank
you're
you, and do pop me an email pointing me to particular things
Well,
that I can look at. I'll be glad to have a
I like the
look.
ones that were stated to me
Okay.
during that interrupt. What misspeaking
All right.
parts did I do?
Okay,
Whether it was a 2012 bylaw committee that's not on any website, it's only in paper, or whether it was the discussion about that particular warehouse or the other several that were coming in, I'd love to hear which one was a misstatement on my part.
great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Anybody else?
Mike, can I just add, because
Yeah.
Mr. Latina brought it up, and I'd like to put it on for our work session. I'd like us to revisit the tax implications.
Okay.
Because I've done some analysis and reached out, and I'm not getting the new,
I missed what you said you wanted to do.
the tax implications. I'd like us to revisit that and bring in the appropriate people.
I mean, what the tax implications are, or what in general
What-
we should consider as tax implications? to
No,
what degree we
what
should
they
consider.
are, right? He brought up regarding the warehouse, because I've just.
Oh, okay, well, that's,
Yep.
oh, yeah. We can
part
certainly,
of-
we can certainly put that on the agenda for a work session, and it's probably a
you.
sensible place to put it. If you can jot that down, Evan, and we'll have a look. Anybody else like to say something? If not, that closes the public input session. And we have a bunch of administrative matters to take care of. First one up, Hillside Lane Extension, a Form G lot release.
I don't believe there's anyone here.
Okay,
It's fairly boilerplate administrative.
okay,
So these are the first and second agenda items are what you typically see for lot releases. These
Yeah.
are subdivisions that were built 15, 20 years ago. Lots have been sold and resold. And in this particular case, for whatever reason, this particular real estate transaction, the attorneys involved flagged it Lot 3D, which is, I want to say it's 14 Hillside.
okay.
Did not have.
Never had a
lot
release?
Correct.
Okay, well, that's fairly straightforward. Anybody, I don't know if there's any discussion on this. Would anybody care to make a motion that we,
Can I just ask a question, just from a knowledge perspective? How did this come up? Is this part of, like how did we know that?
it
didn't have-
comes up in the title search sometimes.
So,
when-
okay, if
when
there's
the-
like a-
When the attorneys are, like the
Someone
third
wants
or
to sell
fourth
it.
transfer. of this
Okay,
property.
okay.
And it just pops up, and some title attorneys are sensitive to it and some aren't, and, you never quite know what you're gonna
Okay,
get.
that was just wondering how it.
Yeah, that's how these things happen.
Thank you.
Okay. Got a motion to grant the lot release? Any volunteers?
Do we have anything from engineering that says that all the conditions that would be required for this
No,
lot are met?
as I mentioned, these are
They're
older
very old.
subdivisions.
Okay.
And the lots have been, houses have been occupied, they've been sold and resold.
So they are what they are, and they've
Yeah,
been there a
so
long
even
time.
Even if something
Yeah, right.
was outstanding,
It's a little
you're not
late.
gonna punish a
You can't do
homeowner
anything about it.
for that.
Okay,
All right.
I'll take a motion if anybody wants to make it.
I'll make a motion to
Okay.
release Hillside Lane Extension.
Second?
Second.
Second from Mike. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, looks like 6 zip. All right, the second one is a very similar situation for Steeple Drive. Is this the same situation, Evan?
Same situation. Let me just see if there's anyone on Zoom here for Steeple. So, and if you're interested in speaking to the board, you can put your video on and unmute yourself. Same situation, though, Mr.
Okay.
Peters.
I make a motion to release lot on 4 Steeple Drive.
Okay, I have a motion. I have a second by Mike. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that takes care of that. Third one's, this is just an endorsement on the A&R. We already passed this.
No, this is a presentation.
Okay.
First time you're seeing this? Someone here for this A&R?
And anybody here for Summer Street parcels 27 and 31 Billerica? Oh,
Yes,
thank you.
my name's Mary Clevin. I live at 31 Billerica Road. And we acquired the Summer Street parcel with the father of our deceased neighbor. And we would like to split the parcel so that we each own our own backyards. And I don't have to police somebody else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have, you have a copy of that?
There may be copies in the bucket behind you. I think the backstory with this is that it was a town-owned.
It's a
It was
town-owned
surplus.
parcel that there was a sealed bid for.
Okay.
We bid.
I know the piece.
We bid as a partnership because we didn't know there was a non-collusion clause in the bid
Yeah.
packet. And we had already discussed it since December, so we formed the partnership.
All right, so this is a split up of that particular lot. Okay, I see what you're doing. I see exactly what you're doing.
It's kind
Okay.
of a reverse L, that Summer Street parcel at the bottom.
Yep. Yeah, I remember it now. I've actually walked on it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the pool that was
yes, it's
Yeah.
Town
the,
property.
It was just messy.
okay. And we're not creating any buildable lots here.
no, it's wetlands mostly in the back. We have
show
no
us?
plans to build.
Can you show us on the map where the parcel is? I'm a little confused looking at it.
I see what it
On the
is.
screen here, you just, I
Oh,
want you to point.
show the parcel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You're gonna,
So here's our parcel, and
Okay.
here's our neighbor at 27.
Got it. Thank
And
you.
so the dividing line is just continuing the
Yeah, that makes
same
sense.
property line all the way down.
And as I recall,
very
most
much.
of that's wet back there
It
anyway.
is, it is.
Okay. Anybody on the board have a question or a concern?
I mean, I think the piece of property goes back on the tax
Yeah.
Yes.
rolls, right?
I've been looking at it for
You
free
bu-
for
you bought
30
it from
years,
the
but
town.
now I'm paying.
Okay. Well,
so I make a motion to approve the A&R 677 of Summer Street parcel 27 and 31 Billerica Road.
no
With
determination of
with no
zoning.
determination of
I have a
zoning.
motion. Second?
Second.
Got a second by Nan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Thank
you
you.
got it. Thank you very much. Okay. Now we get to some of the meat here. The first is a new public hearing on 255 Princeton Street. I believe that's better known as UMass West. We probably have a notice.
You can read the notice right off the agenda if you like.
Okay, I will do that. This is 255 Princeton Street, Maple Multifamily Land SE LP for the construction of a 394-unit multifamily development with integrated surface parking, loading facilities, and on-site infrastructure improvements. The site is located in the RB district and is shown as parcel 1D on map 20, block 74, lot 1, and consists of approximately 34 acres. The applicant requests site plan review under section 195-104 per article 15, UMass West Multifamily Housing Overlay District, and any other permit relief as may be required under the Chelmsford zoning bylaw to allow the proposed use project. And I think we have some things in the file to read.
You may
on this.
have a couple letters. While Nancy's grabbing those, just remind the board and the audience, we've dedicated approximately 1 hour
Right.
to this. May not cover everything in that 1 hour, likely will be continued.
That was my anticipation.
I know that the proponent has a refresher PowerPoint. Your peer review consultant from Beta is on the line.
Okay.
You've seen their review. And town engineer Anthony Rapucci is also on the line,
Okay.
if need be.
All right, so we're going to assume that this is going to extend over a couple of sessions, but we'll get the introductory material and the startup taken care of now. You all set?
I believe so. All right, so we have a stack of department letters here. The first one is from, you can take a seat while I do
Oh, I'm
this
sorry,
if you
okay,
okay.
okay.
It's going to take a while.
Because this is going to take a while. Just a matter of comfort. Let's see, the first one is from Fire Prevention Office. Dear members of the board, the Fire Prevention Office has reviewed the proposal for the new apartment complex at 255 Princeton Street in North Chelmsford on the former site of UMass Lowell West Campus and finds the following. Water supply appears to be adequate. The required pressure and flow shall be confirmed by a current water flow test performed proximate to the site. All calculations shall be submitted to the Fire Prevention Office for approval. We will continue to work with the project proponent and North Chelmsford Water as this project moves forward. Fire hydrant locations as shown on this plan are generally adequate. However, the hydrant that serves Building 3 and the hydrant that is to serve the Choice Building shall be moved to the building side of their respective driveways, which will allow the fire department to keep the road open in the event of a fire. The Chelmsford Fire Department requires a hydrant within 60 feet of the fire department connection and an additional hydrant within 500 feet of all exterior points of the building for manual firefighting operations. All hydrants and fire protection equipment shall maintain clearances as contained in 527 CMR 1 and the Chelmsford Fire Prevention Site Plan Review Guide. Access for firefighting apparatus and emergency vehicles as shown on this plan is adequate. The project proponent shall use sloped or flush curbing wherever possible on the site, especially on corners that are susceptible to contact with turning fire apparatus. All fire lanes shall be marked with approved pavement markings and/or approved signage. The project proponent has submitted a fire truck turning plan, which uses a template based on Chelmsford Fire Department Ladder 1 dimensions and specifications. Fire apparatus access shall be designed to withstand the weight of fire apparatus. Snow storage as indicated on submitted plans is acceptable. Snow storage shall not impede or obstruct fire access roads or turnarounds. If in the event of snowfall that cannot be adequately stored so as to maintain all fire access roads at their full width, all excess snow shall be removed from the site. All exits from buildings shall have sidewalks to allow a continuous path from the exit to a public way. The proposed dumpster and compactor location is acceptable. An automatic sprinkler system conforming to NFPA 13 and a fire alarm system conforming to NFPA 72 shall be required. It also appears that a standpipe system that complies with NFPA 14 is required based on the elevation profile of submitted plans. All fire protection systems shall be, shall be monitored by a UL-approved central station monitoring system, and all components and fire protection systems must comply with state building code and Chelmsford Fire Department regulations. All plans for fire protection systems shall be submitted for review using the Chelmsford Fire Department online permitting system. The applicant is advised that the Chelmsford Fire Department requires compliance with emergency responder radio coverage standards as issued by the Fire Prevention Office and the Building Code. The applicant shall provide acceptable interior access to any mechanical spaces located on the rooftop or within the attic. Knox boxes are required and shall be installed at locations acceptable to the Fire Prevention Office. The applicant must apply to the Town of Chelmsford E911 Committee for address and numbering. Applications shall be submitted to the E911 Committee through its coordinator, Town Clerk Tricia Zuras. If a new street name is proposed for this location, the proponent must contact the office of Fire Chief Gary Ryan for street name approval. The proponent's engineering team has been very forthcoming during the entire design process, and the Fire Prevention Office will continue to converse with them regarding this proposal. This office would approve of this project with these conditions and changes, and I ask the Planning Board to make this letter part of their approval process. Respectfully submitted, Danielle Kotsufis, Captain, Chelmsford Fire Department. Evan, is there a way to lower that? It's trying to blow my papers away, and it's cold.
Trying to keep you cool.
It's cold. Okay, the next letter is from the Department of Public Works. Dear members, this office has reviewed the set of plans, Alexan, Chelmsford, by the Architectural Team, Inc., dated June 17, 2022. As a result of this review, this office has the following comments. Utility comments. Location, size, and type of existing mains services should be labeled and identified prior to demolition of existing utilities. DPW will need to be notified prior to sewage disconnections from the town's system to properly be cut and capped. Cross-slope conflicts for sewer and water should be noted with elevations. Sewer design and construction needs to be inspected by design engineers and certified that built in compliance with plans and DEP regulations. Stormwater comments. Town of Chelmsford, DPW, agrees with the findings in stormwater peer review performed by Beta Group, Inc. Traffic comments. Error in volumes shown that conflict on Table 7 and Figure 3. Traffic concerns for cut-through streets from Princeton Street to Middlesex Street, in particular Walter G. Weed Street and Beach Street. A traffic impact assessment will need to be conducted 6 months after the completion of 255 Princeton to determine the LOS in the study area intersections. Due to the post-construction 5% increase in intersection volume at respective intersections, EB at Princeton and Wood would be increasing by 17%, and WB at Princeton and North will be increasing by 16% during weekday morning peak hour. If LOS has been shown to decrease from current LOS, a correction will be placed on the town, and a percentage of costs will be required to ease the burden on the town. General comments. As-built plans should be submitted on paper no larger than 24 by 36, a D-size print, and with a digital copy in PDF ACAD upon completion of the project. All existing and/or proposed utilities should be clearly and accurately labeled. Size, material, existing proposed, rim, invert, etc. on the drawing, reflecting the most updated utility connections and sizing. During construction, care should be taken to maintain separation of at least 10 feet horizontally from the edge of sewer services to the edge of water services. Where a horizontal separation of 10 feet is not practical, both services can be installed closer to each other, but the water service must be 18 inches higher than the sewer service per DEP standards. See Massachusetts Water Laws, Chapter 9, Section 9.8. Provision for an enclosed dumpster pad and dumpster should be depicted upon the plan sets. The long-term and perpetual care of the dumpster, including the emptying and the enclosure, will be the responsibility of the property owner. All handicap parking signs must meet the requirements of MGL, Part 1, Title 7, Chapter 40, Section 22A, and clearly and legibly display the following message: handicap parking, special plate required. Unauthorized vehicles may be removed at owner's expense. Princeton Street is within the state ROW and will require state permitting. DPW requires a trench and road opening permit. If you have any questions, please contact this office at 978-250-5228. Sincerely, Anthony Rapucci, Town Engineer. The next letter is from the Chelmsford Police Department. Members of the Planning Board, I am in receipt of your request for departmental review and comments, 255 Princeton Street, AKA UMass West Campus, Planning Board Public Hearing, July 27th, 2022. I have reviewed the submitted plans as well as personally visited the site. In my review, I do not have an area of concern. The proposed plan indicates the addition of a single crosswalk on Princeton Street at the intersection of Dartmouth Street. This is found on sheet number C-102B. I would urge the developer to plan a crosswalk at the driveway of the project site across Princeton Street to Brulette Street. There are currently no sidewalks on the project side, southerly side, of Princeton Street, nor does the plan indicate the addition of any. The sidewalk is presently on the northerly side of Princeton Street, opposite the project site. In my review of the Traffic Impact Assessment, TIA, I did observe a crosswalk marked at the intersection of Princeton Street and Brulette Street, as well as at Princeton Street at Dartmouth Street. I have line-of-sight concerns about the proposed crosswalk at Princeton Street and Harvard Street. Furthermore, based on my review of the TIA, I believe the intent of the proposed crosswalk at Princeton Street and Dartmouth Street was to serve the bus stop for LRTA bus number 17 located at Princeton Street and Harvard Street. When I searched the LRTA service area, there is a stop for bus number 17 indicated at Princeton Street and Brulette Street, which would adequately serve the project. I feel that a well-constructed crosswalk, Mass DOT, and ADA compliant, at the intersection of Princeton Street and Brulette will be appropriate. I would also recommend the installation of crosswalk beacons that can be activated by a pedestrian at this intersection. These have been installed at several sites in town and have undoubtedly increased pedestrian traffic. Okay. The next one is from the departmental assistant, Becky DeSilva. Let's see. Oh, that's the request. Okay, this is from just an attachment from the police department that says see attached letter. Okay, the next one is from the North Chelmsford Water District. Dear board members, the North Chelmsford Water District has reviewed the applicant's proposal to construct a 391-unit residential multifamily housing development off of 255 Princeton Street. The North Chelmsford Water District will supply water with the full understanding that the applicant shall follow the rules and regulations of the North Chelmsford Water District and the Chelmsford Fire Department's requirements and agree to the following conditions. 1. Building 1, Building 2, and Building 3, 4-story residential multifamily buildings will have one common master compound R900 radio read water meter with a strainer and a state of Massachusetts approved testable double-check valve assembly at the water meter for containment. Building 4 and Building 5, 2 5-unit townhouses will have a straight lineal sleeved 1-inch water service for each unit, separately metered with the R900 radio read water meters. Each residential unit will be charged a domestic system demand charge entrance fee per unit at the single family more than 1 unit rate. 391 in total. Each building will have a fire sprinkler service and pay a fire demand fee for the square footage of the total sprinklered area and a state of Massachusetts approved testable double-check valve assembly at the fire sprinkler service. The wastewater treatment facility will have its own water meter and must be protected with a state of Massachusetts approved testable reduced pressure zone backflow prevent. There will be no lawn irrigation allowed to be tied into the North Chelmsford Water District. The new 8-inch ductile iron water main will be looped from the existing 6-inch water main at the entrance of 255 Princeton Street and tied into the 8-inch water main from St. Andrew Way via a pre-existing easement and looped and tied into the pre-existing 8-inch water main that comes from the village of Meadowwoods. This will eliminate any potential dead ends. The applicant shall install gate valves and follow the recommendations of the water impact study done by Tata and Howard engineers. 7, all existing water mains, fire hydrants, gate valves, etc. shall be removed by the applicant. 8, the existing water utility easements shall be legally conveyed to the North Chelmsford Water District, and a as-built utility map shall be given to the North Chelmsford Water District upon completion. 9, the NCWD will make sure that the applicants follow all details that are submitted on the drawings, proper depth of pipe, proper bedding and backfill materials, thrust blocks, etc. 10, all materials, inspections, overhead, entrance fees, tapping of water services, etc. will be coordinated through the North Chelmsford Water District. 11, the water impact study strongly recommends that an 8-inch water main and fire hydrant be installed at the entrance of 255 Princeton Street from the existing water main that connects to the Lowell Regional Water Department for a future emergency connection with a T and a future gate valve. 12, the first 2 fire hydrants shown on the plan shall be shifted closer to Princeton Street in front of Building 4 to the left of Unit 1 and Building 5 to the left of Unit 6. I cleared this with fire prevention and they are in agreement. Sincerely, Bruce J. Harper, Water Superintendent. The next letter is from Beta.
I don't know if you need to read that one.
No, we probably
Okay.
don't need to read it. But it is in the
That's the
record.
that's the
report.
stormwater
Peer
review.
review, right.
And you're, okay, so that is,
You should have 2 resident letters.
yeah, hang in. I also have a letter from the Board of Health with no comments. So that is the end of departmental letters. Resident letters. Mr. Raisbeck, Chair, in reference to second notice of date correction from the Planning Board for Wednesday, July 27th, referring to the construction at 255 Princeton Street for the construction of 394-unit multifamily development. I attended 2 meetings at the Planning Board regarding the above and 1 meeting at the Board of Selectmen also regarding this project. I stated my concerns regarding the possible impact of this project to Meadowwood, Windermere, and Princeton Street, then submitted my written comments for the record to the Planning Board. In the Board of Selectmen meeting, I recommend that if a building permit is approved, the sewer drainage piping be installed in the road towards Princeton Street at this time. I would, manage that a sewerage facility would be installed in Chelmsford sometime in the future. This is a narrow access road, and it would be difficult to install the piping later and still have access to the site. Also, at that meeting, the sewerage consultant stated that we should not be concerned about any contamination from the sewerage facility to Meadowwood, as drainage would flow toward the Merrimack River. I think you are aware that the area of that property along Princeton Street is mainly taken up by wetlands. I don't see how contaminated water could flow to the Merrimack River without contaminating the wetlands. I have nothing further to add. I don't see why I should attend another planning board meeting, as I felt my comments fell on deaf ears. Regards, Claude Royal, 222 Augusta Way, North Chelmsford, Massachusetts. The second letter is to the attention of Mike Raisbeck, Chair, regarding comments on 255 Princeton Street. As Meadowwood residents living at 17 St. Andrews Way, we are abutters to the 255 Princeton Street property. We have been closely following the proposals property in question and have attended numerous information sessions. Several months ago, I testified via Zoom that before we purchased our unit in September 2013, the first comment made by the home inspector was, "I'd be worried about that property," pointing to it across the street from our home. We've been worried by some of the rumors about what might be built on it. We have attended numerous information sessions with Trammell Crow and are now pleased with the proposal. Trammell Crow's proposal for construction of a 394-unit multifamily development with integrated surface parking, loading facilities, and on-site infrastructure improvements is, in our minds, a carefully thought-out proposal by the developer. The proposal includes many of the modifications made during Trammell Crow's meetings with the neighbors, modifications which made the development more appropriate in the neighborhood and compatible with the neighbors. We believe the plan as presented is worthy of rezoning and urge you to take appropriate action. Thank you sincerely, Lawrence and Florence Baturin.
Okay, thank you.
That's the end.
Okay,
Water?
yeah.
Good job.
That was a mouthful. Okay, I guess we're ready. Oh, I see the proponent. And I'm presuming that tonight we're basically looking at a presentation covering the whole project, and this is going to extend probably another session or two at least. So we'll limit this to roughly an hour. We'll finish up maybe 20 past 8, if we can keep that schedule. Take it away.
We can do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Mark Baranski, Trammell Crow Residential, 2276 Washington Street, Newton Lower Falls. What we have done, which I think you're aware of, is we've prepared a PowerPoint presentation that is a summary of kind of what's been presented to date to make sure that all members of the board are aware of how this project has progressed. It does reflect tweaks, I would say, to the program since the town meeting. And if you'll allow me, I will give you a brief sort of explanation of what's been going on over the last couple months since the town meeting to kind of show where we're going and where we're heading. As you all are probably aware, the state AG was delivered the bylaw to assess for I guess the appropriateness of the process, and that was resolved in late June, early July. So I'll defer to Mr. Belansky, but I believe this is a law now that has been adopted by the town. That reflects generally what was, well, not generally, it reflects what was discussed at the special town meeting on February 24th. While we have been waiting for the AG process to proceed, we have proceeded with some design. Obviously, you can't fully release it because if there were some issues with the state AG, you'd have to step back a bit. One particular landmark that occurred is that the state issued the hydrogeo certificate for the property, for the site, for the wastewater treatment plant. What that means, and we do have our consultant available if you should have questions, is that from a analytics perspective and a calculations perspective, the state is comfortable that the wastewater treatment plant is doing everything that it is intended to do. The next steps for wastewater treatment plant are the release of the design of the plant itself, which is actually underway now. And then ultimately, prior to usage of the system, we will require a groundwater discharge permit from the state. We have quite a bit of time, obviously, to receive that. We've also commenced the MIPA process, and in particular, the EJ populations, compliance, the environmental justice populations. We've had a couple public meetings. One of the earlier meetings, I would say in April or May, members of the town administration were participated or had attended that Zoom meeting. And we're working with the state to answer the questions that they typically have for a project of this size and complexity. I would characterize this as a fairly time-consuming process, not really one that I think will reveal anything that we haven't anticipated. And of course, we've been proceeding with some of the design. As was noted, we received many comments from town departments as well as the peer reviewer beta on, ranging from July 14th to July 20th, so roughly a week ago. And I can tell you that our consultants, all of whom are available either in person or remotely, have been digging into those, and we expect to respond to most of the comments or questions in fairly short order. So I would say that the process is moving forward as we would expect it to. We did have one further meeting to discuss some of the fencing and landscaping issues on the southern border of the parcel, and we did amend our original plan, which had a fence running in a different way, and now it has kind of changed. So we still are taking in feedback. We've incorporated that feedback from our neighbors as the design has proceeded. I'm going to lean over so I can see what iteration. It's hard to see that one, sorry. One of the, probably the, as you're aware, the unit count remains the same, the unit mix remains the same. I would say the one kind of change, and I alluded to it in town meetings and planning board meetings prior, is feedback from the fire department is that they really, they would require an elevator in the 3-story structure that's proposed and is identified on plan as, I think that says building, is it building 3 or 4? Okay, you guys can see that better. Building 3. Integrating an elevator into a 3-story structure didn't make a lot of sense from a planning perspective. And so what we have done, and which we are in compliance with the bylaw, is that's now a 4-story structure. It has minimized the footprint a bit as a consequence, but it's the same unit. It is a couple more units. I think we anticipated 48 originally in that building. Now we have 51, but we've taken 3 out of the other buildings to account for that. So as I've said, the unit count and mix remains the same, but we did play a bit with one of the buildings in order to comply with the request of the fire department. As was noted in some of the letters, we have met with the fire department and had a couple calls with them to understand their concerns. And some issues like slope curving are easily resolved and incorporated into the project. So what you see before you now is the site plan that we are proposing. And I would say the only caveat that has been captured that I can see is the fencing between our property and the Meadowwood and Windermere properties runs at sort of a diagonal straight to Princeton and not as is represented there. So that is a bit of a Scrivener's error that we'll get caught up on. Can we go to the next slide? And by the way, please don't hesitate to ask questions. This is representation of the unit mix per building, which, as I said, the only variance from prior discussions is 51 units in the 4-story, building 3 now, as opposed to 48 in a 3-story structure.
So can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Did you say you were adding the elevator for that 3-story, it was a 3-story building, you're adding the elevator?
It's now a 4-story elevator building.
Well, okay, was it Was there an elevator in it the first time?
No, there was
So
never-
Are you building buildings 3 stories without elevators?
Yes.
They're building those.
Yeah, and that is compliant with building code.
It is,
But
okay.
based on the strong opinion of the fire department, we adjusted our program to.
I would just assume that anything over 2 stories automatically has an elevator, but that's just my opinion.
No,
That's good learning experience.
we're
I
learning
was
too.
surprised to hear that, so thank you.
We're learning as well. So again, yeah, this is just a summary of the unit mixes in the various buildings. A summary of the amenities. This really hasn't changed at all from prior iterations. The benefits to Chelmsford, to some extent, this has all been captured in the development agreement and other documents adopted by the town. And again, what is being presented now is the same information that was presented in the past. I'd be glad to speak through it if you'd like, and as I mentioned, our consultants are available to speak if there are specific questions. The big development, as I mentioned, is the issuance from the state of the hydro-geo permit about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Are you done with, you want to continue?
Yeah, I mean, unless there are questions, I'd be glad to answer your questions. I can certainly speak through this if you'd like, but I want to more be available to answer your questions.
I have a question. There was a suggestion raised by for the Clean Energy Committee head about whether or not there'd be any aspects of the building that would be green in terms of the grid and the
Yeah.
heating and the hot water.
That's a great question. We've done a couple things in response to that. This building will be, Mason, 100% electric, heating and cooling, except for the townhomes. So the major structures, the 3 major structures, I can't speak about Choices Building, will all be electric heating and cooling systems. There will be gas service to the townhomes, and there will be gas service to heat the pools and to fire the grills and fire pits. But, our gas consumption, from what was projected to what the effective gas load is now, has been considerably eliminated. We will also be providing electric vehicle charging stations on the property, and I can't remember, what is our ratio? And the buildings will be, the roofs will be solar ready. Is our intent to put solar arrays on the roof systems. So I think those are 3 pretty big issues, and we're able to respond affirmatively to all of those.
So you mean solar ready to be able to put them on in the future, or you think at the certificate of occupancy that you're going to have solar photovoltaic on the roof, photovoltaic on the roof?
I'm trying to remember where we are. I know we're building them solar ready so they can accept the load of the panels. I'll have to respond, I'll have to get back to you. I can't remember
One
where we are.
of the drawings has them
Well,
on the roof,
Then it's
but,
got to be there.
Then it's going to be there.
okay.
You want to hear from Beta
So-
Peer Review after?
Yes, I think we
Yeah.
probably should just get them to give a summary of what they found.
So are you planning to put in electric ranges in the kitchens, not gas?
Yes.
Ooh, okay. Just,
To
ooh,
be perfectly honest, that's what we do on all our
I
properties.
wouldn't live there. It's just true.
All right, Phil is up and he's ready. So Phil, when you're ready, I think the board's looking for a brief overview for this evening.
Yeah, no, I was hoping you're gonna read the whole letter.
Thanks.
You're welcome to read it, Phil.
No, that's quite all right. It's pretty boring, and, a project of this size, this is a typical review. Several items are administrative and, probably not gonna change the plans. So I really just wanna talk about comments that may change the design, even if slightly. So if you go to page 2, G3, we recommend that it looks like the grading is very steep right down either to or from the parking area in some instances or the sidewalk. We recommend a 3-foot kind of level area especially adjacent to parking, so that people will actually use the whole space. And also just prevent, erosion and other issues associated with slopes. Having said that, if you look at SW1, there is at the basin at the corner of Princeton and at the Project Drive, there at least was shown and confirmed in the on the sidewalk, a pipe running from the corner of the intersection through that basin, outletting to the pond, to the wetland area. So that should be accommodated. There should be the required soil test data for each of the basins. SW13 TSS and phosphorus calculations should be provided. So some of the things we consider, so if you look at the grading plan for, let's see, sheet 103B for building B, building 3, the grading is very tight to the building. And also the majority of all the stormwater is being directed to one area, primarily that stormwater basin. We recommend that separate roof infiltration systems be installed close to where the building is, but for two reasons. One, to mimic the existing infiltration recharge characteristics of the site and distributed around the site. And the second is, I think we could reduce the size of that big basin, give that building 3 area to provide open space, usable open space, et cetera, maybe recreational areas. Otherwise, the site is very steeply sloped. The second, we recommend separating at a minimum, recommending separating the stormwater from roof runoff and pavement runoff to maximize the usage of the sediment forebays and other BMPs that would remove TSS and phosphorus from the system. And also because of the traffic load on the site, it is considered a LUPL, so we would expect oil grit separators to be installed prior to infiltration. One comment that didn't make it in our letter was the basins have significant slopes. We would need access, vehicle access to maintain these, so that should be provided as well. Unfortunately, that didn't make it in the letter, but anyway, those are the issues that I think may make this plan better, and the other issues are, like I said, administrative and probably easily dealt with without any changes.
Thank you very much.
I apologize for forgetting to also mention that I believe yesterday, abutters and departmental heads may have received a package regarding our NOI submittal to Concom. So that is also in process.
So that's going to relate to this. Okay. Very good. Have you had a chance to absorb the peer review information yet? I don't know how recently you got that.
As I said, some arrived about a week and a half ago, some arrived late last week. I want to be nice to my consultants and give them a little bit of time to
Understood.
absorb it.
Okay.
I would say broadly that, certainly with the comments of Phil and others, we do not see anything that I would characterize as a problem.
Okay.
These are all relatively easy things to accommodate or resolve.
Okay, good. So I presume that'll get worked out over the next couple of weeks as we
That is
go
our
another
intent,
round.
yes.
Very good. Let's see, are there any more in the presentation? Most of us remember it pretty well
Yeah.
from.
I've gone on the
we've seen it
premise that
before.
there's one new
Yeah.
member that may need to be brought up to speed on some issues, and again, we're available to answer your questions, but I think most of you are fairly familiar. The site really hasn't changed from all the iterations that you've all seen in the past, call it 12 months.
Great, thank you.
Is choice coming in separate?
I believe these plans show choice, show the proposal.
They just show the outline
Is
of
that
the
your
building, they don't
understanding,
give the details.
Yeah, they, as part of the site plan
You're
approval
right.
process, they are here.
Okay.
As part of a building permit application process, they will come in separately. As part of MIPA, they are part of our overall submittal package.
So the only questions I have is, based off of some of the letters, that future pipe, what was the, have you guys decided on a future sewer line or not
We're
doing
not
that?
tying into the sewer line, we're actually not allowed to tie into the sewer line by virtue of so that, it's, there's not a lot to respond to in that letter, because we don't have the right, we basically ceded that right
So
to
do you
ever tie
see,
into
do you-
it, so.
do you see in the town in the future, I don't know.
No.
Why
They
did
put a-
they
They
ask
put a
for
new
that?
sewer plant in.
The development agreement
they're gonna stay.
precludes them
Yeah,
from ever
it
tying
does.
in.
Okay, so it's a.
Even
so
if you build a whole big brand-new system, we can't tie into it, we agreed to that.
And you'll never
hence-
tie into it.
Hence, we'll never tie into it. That's
Okay.
why we're building our own plant.
You would have to
chose for the
update
fire
the development agreement.
Okay.
That'd be a
All
whole
right.
lot of work.
And then the other question I have is, was there any talking about, I think maybe we've already settled it, remind me if we did, on the south side of Princeton Street of putting a sidewalk in?
Princeton Street's outside of Princeton, so on our side of Princeton Street.
Yeah, there's no sidewalk.
Yes, and part of the reason for that is most of that is within the non-disturb or non-build buffers
Okay.
for the wetlands.
Okay.
And that is one of the challenges we've always faced.
Okay.
Gotcha. Okay,
Wetlands reason.
all right, do you have any more over there, Evan?
No.
Okay, well, first of all, let's see if, we'll open up a public hearing in a minute. But how do you anticipate this going forward over the next couple of meetings? I'm trying to get a sense of how many meetings this is going to take and what we should be planning for.
Again, I don't want to beat up my consultants.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
hear too
It'd be
much,
nice of them.
But I expect that all the peer review process will be resolved prior to the next planning board meeting, which I
Okay.
believe is the
August 10th.
August 10th.
Okay, would you be comfortable then in making that the next appearance on this matter?
Yeah, I don't think they will, but I will, yes.
Okay, gotcha. All right, if a major problem occurs there, let us know.
Yes, we will.
Okay. Very good. So we'll plan on having you back on the 10th.
Question?
Yes.
Yeah, could you get us a copy of the landscaping plan that has the plants designated? Well in advance of that meeting. This is a pretty complicated plan to review, and I get to review it.
Can we slip sheet that in?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Mark, this is Sean, one of your loving consultants. And while you bring up the landscape and the planting plan, if you don't mind me interjecting, I'm just curious to make sure we're able to deliver what is needed. So we certainly have a planting plan, and I'm not sure how much of this has been seen or shared, so please forgive me if I'm being ignorant. Here, let me turn on a camera as well, sorry. So we have a planting plan. At the moment, we have a plant list of all of the variety of tree species, and I'm just curious, is the expressed desire to have the tree species indicated? We haven't gotten to the level of the understory planting that will certainly occur around the base of the buildings, but we do have a pretty representative list of the plant material that we were intending to use within there. Obviously, it's just very early in the process for us to be able to get to the level of detail for quantities of those, but we definitely wanted to get you guys a representative plant list of that proposed plant palette. So I just want to make sure we're giving you what you need here as we go forward.
Hi. So there's a couple issues. One is that I'm looking at the electronic copy, and can't read the names on it. I'm assuming that I will be able to on the printed copies, the large-scale printed
You
copies.
should be able to, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Not doing either one of us any good if you can.
That's right. But I would have rather been able to read the electronic copy. And the second issue is that I have no idea from this drawing where each of these plants are going to be used. And if you talk to any of the other developers in the area, they'll tell you that I get pretty fussy about where some plants go in terms of their destructive capabilities. Or their interference capabilities. So I do want to see a plan that I can review on a plant location by plant location basis, please.
So okay,
The other thing is that this particular file that has the landscape plan in it is labeled as landscape and lighting, and I'm not seeing any lighting layout in there.
Take a look. Yeah, we certainly would need that.
And we need that.
Yeah, so there are, we can obviously highlight those in bigger dots so they're easier to read. Obviously, I think that plan's at 80 scale or 60 scale. It's pretty tiny
Yeah.
in order to have that fit on one sheet.
Understood.
We can definitely, add some color to that if it's easier to read regarding the light locations. But yeah, they're definitely on there, but they're obviously pretty small.
Yeah, so we not only need the location of the lights, we need the specifications for the lights, and we need a lighting intensity map that shows.
Yep, we have all the photometrics to go with that.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah,
So
not a problem
make sure
there.
that's in there, please.
And one, I don't know if it's a caveat, but clarification. In our conversations with neighbors, what we've kind of said is that we're iterating the locations of fencing and certainly planting. That may not, as it's drawn right here, may not reflect reality if there's ledge or if there's healthy tree cover and other things. So one caveat we would put is that we'd like some leeway in where the fence, within a couple feet if we have to move around. And I'm sure Sean can address that, the language for that.
Of course.
Yep.
Okay, let me just get back to my copy of this material.
Come on. There we go.
Okay, any more questions from the board at this point? All right, I think at this point, it behooves us to open up the public hearing. Yeah, you can bet that this is going to get continued. This is certainly not the only night of public hearing, but we can get underway, and in particular, at this stage, if you have any comments or suggestions that might result in a change of plans, the earlier we know this stuff, the better. So, that's okay with you, I will open this up to for the public hearing. Did anybody like to appear at this point? Now, we will continue it whether or not anybody gets up tonight. We will continue it, so don't worry about losing your chance. Yes? Yeah, please do.
My name is Bill Sekelic. I'm a resident of 15 Muirfield Way, which is adjacent here. Well, you had a prior one, but anyway, it's in a... My principal concerns are the aesthetics as they appear from the neighborhood side, and from the public side, especially along Augusta Way and along Princeton Street. And as you walk now from along Princeton Street from Lowell up to Augusta Way, which is when you get to the border of Lowell and Chelmsford, which is a sign there, and that border is right there where this development cuts in. And you go from an area where there's a sidewalk, and which is somewhat groomed, although not the best grooming that you might see, but it's at least groomed on the Lowell side. But you get to the Chelmsford side, and you get an overgrown chain link fence that's really disheveled, unkempt.
Yes, I know what you mean.
And it's not the impression that we would like to have going from Lowell into Chelmsford. I hope you agree with that. And I think that as part of the approval process here, that there should be a requirement that that water is cleaned up and maintained, and it should be legally binding on them, so in the future, if they're neglected, it can be enforced. I also have noticed from looking at the plan, and first of all, I want to thank you all for the hard work you put into this, because obviously this is not all fun and games, and I want to thank especially Becky in your office, who was very courteous to me yesterday when I was looking at the plans. But as I looked at the plans, I see that there's a 6-foot PVC fence along the border, all the way from Princeton Street, all the way along the periphery of the project. And I think that fence is probably necessary along St. Andrew's Way or St. Andrews Street, but along Augusta Way, or I'm not sure whether it's way or street, along Augusta, I think the fence actually may be distracting, because there's already in that area, it's forested essentially, and it's a rather steep hill, and to place a PVC fence there is going to be distracting to the adjoining neighborhood. Really, that area ought to be maintained to the same standard
Here.
and compatible with the adjacent neighborhood, which is basically well landscaped, especially at that entrance along Augusta. And that's really all of my concerns, and I thank you for giving me the
Well,
time.
thank you very much for those thoughts, and the proponent is here, and he's hearing that, and perhaps in a couple of weeks, we can, he may even have some responses. Hello.
Hi, I'm Helen Blasioli. I live in the village at Meadowwood, and I'm here to say that we requested that fence. We have worked hard to get that the way it is. On the opposite side of Augusta Way is the same green fence that you can't even tell is there, and nobody has ever known it was there. We like this because it keeps everybody out from walking in behind the barbed wire fence, or whatever you want to call it, that the state requires for their property on their part. And it keeps people from going up there and coming onto our property. We pay for that, we maintain that, and we don't want it to have anything but that PVC there for that reason.
Okay,
Thank you.
good, thank you very much. Okay, so we have a couple of views on this, but obviously it's a concern. Hey, Brian.
Brian Latina, Precinct 4 Town Meeting Rep, 15 Jesse Road is my address. I'd just like to add another concern, and again, the board needs to tell the developer to do these things, that the sidewalks not only be ADA compliant, pitch and slope, but they be generous in that. We now have a new disability commissioner, Frankie Radinkowski, and it gave me new perspective on this. He's fully in an electric wheelchair, and he actually walked in the 4th of July parade for a short period, and gave me new perspective on exactly the sidewalk pitch, 4 feet wide and all that sort of thing. Well, minimum is 39 inches. Don't make it 39, make it wider. Don't have a pitch so that it's difficult for a able-bodied person to walk on it. And the slope on that hill is pretty significant. Last project I grumbled about was 3 at Mill Road, and they got a variance to the ADA compliance. They have a 15-degree pitch on the sidewalk. It's impossible
15
for
degrees.
any of you to walk up that sidewalk. Certainly not accessible for the handicapped school that's across the street for any of those residents to go there and live there. So my challenge to the developer through you folks, to ask them, please make those sidewalks down to the Princeton Street comfortably accessible, not just to ADA compliance, which they should be required to do, but the slope and pitch. And every parking area needs to have hash marks on those handicap spaces. And if you put the handicap spaces opposite each other, you do a double wide hash mark so that the vans with the 4-foot
Yes, you get the
lift
van space in the middle,
can
yeah.
fit between them.
Yeah,
That's
I'm-
very important.
Okay, well, the proponent is right behind you, and you can consider that to have been requested of you
Of
by the
bo- of
board to look at this.
Thank you.
Got it.
My name's Ed Duffin, and I live at 270 Princeton Street, right at the crash zone. Forgive me for not being a very good public speaker, but I want to let you know a couple things. First of all, if there's no intent to disrupt the wetlands, why do I have an abutters meeting for a wetlands hearing on the property that just arrived at my house today?
No, that's standard. If there's going to be a hearing, you're going to get a notice based on
You
being
have
in a
no
butter.
intention of changing anything in the wetlands, why would you?
They still have to approve. They still have to look at it.
Okay.
If anything within certain distances from the wetland, they're going to have to consider whether or not real changes are anticipated. You might want to tune in on that hearing
Oh,
and listen to it.
I'll be there at the
Yeah.
Go
hearing.
to it.
Yeah.
I will be there.
Go to it.
Second thing, I don't care who has done a traffic study on that road. I am the traffic consultant on that road.
Yeah.
I live at the intersection of Brulette and Princeton. It is a racetrack. It's a racetrack. We have cars going down there any time of the day, 75 miles an hour. We have drag strips, we have drag races going into the city of Lowell, both lanes. We have guys on their rear wheels on motorcycles. The cut-through traffic on those side roads,
Yeah.
it's a disaster. The people come to the end of the road, they don't stop, they're out there. This goes all the way up from Walter Weed, all the way up to Brulette. They stick out every day and they come flying out. Today, I had a concrete truck and a trash truck. I guarantee you going 50 miles an hour down that road.
It sounds like a little traffic calming is in order.
It's not gonna happen. I've notified the Chelmsford police. I said, you got speeders down here every day. At 2 o'clock in the morning, we have these kids with these putt-putt cars that backfire.
Yeah.
They'll be going down that road at 70 miles an hour, backfiring. I have talked to the Chelmsford police. They put a radar guy over there at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning.
Yeah. a lot of
These
help.
guys look it up at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning to speed down that road. It has to get slowed down somehow. It's a disaster. And once you put that, if that's the only entrance into that development, you're going to have T-bone after T-bone there. And this isn't even affecting once the Rock Bridge gets built, and that will get built. And that will increase even more with the cross-traffic there. It's a disaster. I don't care what the Chelmsford police say, that it's perfectly calm. I see it. I've been there for 31 years. I see what happens on that intersection, on that road, every day. Disaster. It's going to happen. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, that's,
Brad Friedlander from 33 St. Andrews Way. I probably have missed a couple meetings, but tonight was the first time I heard about solar panels on the roof of the buildings. I would just, the only question I would have is, has anyone looked at what that would do for both sight lines from the Village of Meadowwood and also light reflection? Because being where they are and the angles, there's got to be sun reflection coming off of them, and I just want to understand what that impact's going to have on our visibility.
yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't think your sight line's going to change much, but, because the stuff lies pretty flat. But that's an interesting question about the sunlight. All right, well, if we could ask the proponent to consider that and maybe give us some idea what that situation is. Thank you.
Michael Fulton, 8 Muirfield Way. As regards to the traffic on Princeton Street, I would agree nighttime, it's quite lawless down there. At the initial, when this proposal initially came out, one of the things I was concerned about was the intersection of Augusta Way and Princeton Street, because the traffic comes kind of over the hill there, a little bit of a blind corner. And I requested that they see if they could install one of those radar, solar-powered radar signs that would remind people that it's 35 and it flashes if you go 40 or above or something like that.
Sort of like the one coming into South Chelmsford.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
kind of
you
thing
see them
do.
around different places, and
Yeah.
I know it's a state road. I don't know if that issue's been clarified or not, but I would definitely be concerned if that didn't end up there. 'Cause I
Well,
do-
that raises an interesting question. It being a state road, I don't know exactly what authority we have, but it's a question that'll get asked.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Can I just make a
Sure.
comment? It's 35
Yeah, go ahead.
When kids see a 35-mile-an-hour flash,
Yeah.
they want to see how much faster they can
They
go
can.
over the 35.
We were never kids, right? We never did that. Okay. We're about at the 1 hour mark. I don't see anybody jumping up to speak. If there may be one more we could take, or we're going to continue this, I hope, and we'll take it up at the next meeting. All right. I see nobody jumping up, so I would take a motion to continue.
Motion to continue.
And this will be to the 10th
What's the
of
date?
August? Is that the correct date?
Motion to continue August 10th.
Okay, seconded by Paul. In favor? Aye. It's unanimous. Hey, thank you, everybody, for coming. And we'll be at it again in 2 weeks. Okay, well, we have a
Been a few
bit of
minutes.
material. We have the fencing discussion on Princeton. We have the comments about being generous with the ADA, which I thought was a good comment.
Yep.
Do we have anything else that we particularly need to point out?
The calming measures, if that's a.
Yeah, and kind of traffic calming measures. Okay, so that's 3 issues that have come up tonight that we should address the next time around.
Can't they put like those speed bumps that, you know, they do the raised crosswalks?
Yeah.
What they have to do is, but it's a state road, like.
Well, it's a state road, so
So's
we can
County
state road,
7, and they
what
put
we
them
can
on
do.
that,
We-
and 4.
What route's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
We can request it,
What route's
and
that?
5
State
years
road.
from now, we might get something.
Well, the police requested,
Yeah.
the police requested a crosswalk at Princeton and Roulette
Yeah,
with
and
an
I-
elevated,
Yeah,
Oh, they
they
requested?
did. They did
Yeah.
request elevated.
So we'll hear back from the...
Oh,
Okay.
good, Paul's here, great.
Hey, Paul.
You guys mind moving down?
Good.
oh, no, not at all.
All right. So, we are continued. We're to new
Shit
business.
stairs, okay. Should I move all my shit, or are you okay with my bag there?
It's okay.
Citizen petition.
Paul, long time no see?
I know, I
Yeah. All right.
I stole your iPad.
The next order of business is we have a citizen's petition that's been presented. Of course, it being a zoning article matter, it comes through us for the public hearings, and we're going to start that tonight. Hi, how you doing?
Good evening. Chris LaValle, Precinct 10 Town Meeting Rep, and 10 Edgewood Street in Chelmsford.
Chris, before you start, I
Yeah.
just want to let the board know.
Yeah, you're recusing?
That, I'm not recusing because I did call the
I think you're
ethics.
fine.
I am fine, but I did file a disclosure of public, like a potential conflict
Yeah,
of interest
I saw
with the
that. I
town
saw that.
that states that Chris LaValle is married to my sister Linda Tanini, so he is my brother-in-law. I just want to make sure
Okay.
you knew that.
Yeah. Good, thank you. Thank you for doing that.
So tonight I'm going to be presenting to you my proposal for the Fall Town Meeting article. I wanted to start first, Evan, you can go to the next slide. I want to first start by talking about why I'm presenting this. So business models are changing. Partially it's because of the pandemic, where companies had to pivot to new models in order to survive the pandemic. Part of it is because there are advances in technology and/or evolution of business models through normal competition. The slide I have here shows some examples. There's more remote work happening, so less office space is needed, which means that office parks may be redeveloped. There's more delivery of goods rather than in-person shopping, so more distribution centers might be needed. Amazon itself is changing their distribution model to more smaller last-mile facilities, and other companies like Chewy.com will likely follow their lead. These last-mile facilities are becoming more prolific. They are becoming smaller and more automated and efficient, and hiring fewer people per facility. According to a 2019 AP report, Amazon had 200,000 robot vehicles deployed in their facilities, in their distribution centers, which was double from 2018 and way up from 15,000 in 2014. So these are becoming a lot more automated. In the next slide, we see why we must stay current. To protect our town, our infrastructure, wetlands, open space and wildlife, protect our safety, our jobs, our town character, all while still allowing progress. We need to attract the businesses that we want. Do we want businesses that build automated distribution centers that hire very few full-time workers with benefits and only hire contractor drivers from out of town? We need to upgrade our definition of a warehouse. It's currently a singular one-size-fits-all definition that's outdated and doesn't take into any of these changes into account. So in the next slide, I'm summarizing the three parts to this proposal. The first part defines warehouses and replaces the current definition. The second part adds a definition of a distribution center. And the third part adds a new line in the regulation schedule for distribution centers. In the first part, in this first part, we're really defining what a warehouse is, and really focusing it on the storage of material. So if you go to the next slide. We want to clearly distinguish the lower traffic, lower volume warehouses for storage from higher volume, higher traffic distribution centers. I want to focus the definition to facilities that are primarily built to store goods and materials. This was intended to include self-storage facilities. I know that at least one of you has a question on that we can talk about. Because those facilities do store materials and goods. It was also intended to exclude larger facilities that are primarily meant to facilitate the transfer, distribution, or transition of goods and materials rather than primarily storing them. And it was intended to cover facilities less than 50,000 square feet because in those facilities, distribution usually occurs as a function secondary to other uses, like storage or sales. In Article 2, I'll get to why that 50,000 cutoff. So, in this article, we intend to clearly distinguish the higher traffic volume, higher volume distribution centers from lower volume, lower traffic warehouses. We really want to focus the definition of a distribution center to facilities that are primarily built to facilitate the transfer and distribution of goods as their primary purpose. It's intended to include parcel hub and sorting facilities because those are also primarily built for distribution and transition and transfer. So the question becomes, why 50,000 square feet? So this proposal is based on Acton's as a model. Acton is a town very similar to ours, located at the intersection of two major routes, 495 and 2. It's slightly smaller, but very similar populations. And they have similar goals and aspirations that our town does in their Acton 2020 Comprehensive Community Plan. And in researching many of these last mile distribution centers, most are ranging around 200 to 250,000 square feet in range. But one of the newest ones in Bridgewater, which is an Amazon facility, is about 155,000 square feet. Now, going from 200 and 250,000 square feet to 155 is a significant shift in business model and efficiency from Amazon, because they're really reducing their footprints of those last mile facilities with increasing automation. So it won't be long until another shift in automation and efficiency comes, and Amazon or one of these other companies is able to produce a last mile facility at that around 50,000 square feet. So that's why that was kept. And this zoning article really needs to be forward-thinking to make sure that we stay current. Another aspect of this is that many of these larger 200,000 square foot buildings offer space for multiple tenants and not just one. So a 150,000 square foot building could easily be divided up into two tenants operating at 75,000 square feet. And each one of those could be a distribution center. So in summary, I think the 50,000 square feet number eliminates the businesses that are primarily distribution centers, and while allowing the businesses that do distribution as a secondary operation. And on Article 3, the intent here was to clearly exclude distribution centers as we have defined them from any zone in town. And that was the intent of Article 3. So I'd like to thank you for your attention to my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Actually, as
I have a couple.
citizen proposals go, this is rather well thought out.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So this, you said you used Acton as a model. Is it, I mean, in terms of the legal, I haven't looked at Acton's article. In terms of the legal language, is it pretty much the same, or is
Pretty
it?
much word for word.
Okay. And then I guess I have a question for you, Paul Haverty. Are you, I mean, the Article 3 has no across all the zones. Are we able to just prohibit a type of business?
Yes.
We are.
You are absolutely able to prohibit a specific use, except for certain constitutionally protected uses, anywhere in town.
Okay.
And in fact, there's a provision in the zoning bylaws that states that a use that is not specifically set forth is not permitted in any zoning district in town.
Okay. And then I guess another question I have is in terms of a timeline, if you own a property and you haven't brought forth a plan, and this warrant article is brought forth and passed, to whom will it apply?
So that gets a little complicated, and that is actually the handout that I submitted to everyone tonight. So this is really, it's all governed by General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 6, which is the non-conforming uses provision of the state statute. So the first paragraph of General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 6, addresses projects that have not yet received a special permit or a building permit as of the first notification of the public hearing of a zoning change. So anything that
Would
has.
that be tonight?
No, because this is not the public hearing.
This is not the public hearing.
Yeah, so
Okay.
public hearing has not yet been published for the actual hearing on the zoning amendment before the planning board. But once that is published, anything that has not received a building permit or a special permit is subject to the change in the zoning bylaw.
Okay.
However, there are ways to protect yourself if you are a property owner that wants to try to keep the zoning frozen as of, whatever the
Some
specific
prior
date
date.
is. Right, so, General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 6, and Paragraph 5 talks about the recording of a definitive subdivision. So the way it works is you can file a preliminary subdivision plan, then followed within 9 months by a definitive subdivision plan, and presuming that that is ultimately approved, you lock in the zoning as of the time that you filed your plan. And that zoning freeze extends for an 8-year period from the date that the subdivision plan is ultimately approved.
So what's a subdivision plan? Like
It's
a plan to develop a property or tear down a building? and-
Well, no, so a subdivision plan doesn't have to have any identification as to what exactly a property is going to be used for. It is simply creating new lot lines on new streets. So if you are creating a new roadway, you need subdivision approval from the planning board in order to create
So
that
this is
roadway.
like taking a piece of land, whatever, property, and saying we're going to subdivide it and put a street.
Correct.
That freezes.
And
okay.
residences.
So that freezes
freezes
the zoning
zoning,
in
okay.
its entirety. So
Okay.
that includes dimensional requirements, and that includes use requirements, okay? 48, Section 6, Paragraph 6 addresses the submittal of an approval not required plan.
Okay.
Okay, that provides for a 3-year use freeze only. And that, again, is based upon the date that it's submitted. Once it's submitted, you look at what the zoning was that was in place when it was submitted, presuming that ultimately it is endorsed by the planning board. And again, if the planning board chooses to deny either a subdivision approval or A&R endorsement, that is always subject to appeal, and any of the rights that would ultimately accrue are protected during that appeal period. And if it is ultimately determined that the planning board acted improperly in denying either the subdivision approval or the A&R endorsement, then they would continue to have those rights, and that those plans would ultimately be approved by the courts.
Paul, I'm sorry, I'm a little slow.
That's okay.
What is an A&R? Say that again.
So an
Like, give me, like,
approval,
I'm a
an
visual
approval not
person, so-
required plan
Yeah.
is a plan where you're not creating any new streets. What you are creating is new lot lines.
Okay, if I
So,
may ask
Paul-
a question, I'm sorry, go ahead.
New lot lines.
In terms of 5 or 6, could those plans merge lots as well as divide an existing lot?
Theoretically, yes. If it's an approval not
If they're
required plan.
adjacent, merge adjacent lots as well as divide,
Correct.
single lot
Again,
into-
a subdivision,
yeah.
you need to be creating a new roadway, otherwise it's not
Yeah.
really a subdivision approval, it's an A&R endorsement
Okay.
or some other type
All right.
of endorsement.
Now, is there, I mean, both the A&R mechanism and the subdivision mechanism anticipate changes to lot lines?
Correct.
Is there a way, I mean, obviously, the silliest way would be you take a big piece of property, you cut 100 square feet out of it, and you go get an A&R. But, which sounds kind of silly, but is that the only way that the owner of that large chunk of land could go about preserving some rights beyond the determination by the town?
Well, I mean-
Is there such a thing as an A&R that doesn't change a lot line?
No.
But
Okay, so you have to change something.
Yeah, because there's no, if you're not changing lot lines, there's nothing to endorse, there's nothing to approve.
Right, that was my thought, but I can think of all kinds of,
the zoning freeze
Answers.
provisions, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
Paul, is an exercise on paper.
right.
They don't need to execute the A&R
Right.
plan
They just
or the
need to
definitive subdivision
present it.
plan. It's an exercise on paper.
Okay, so if somebody, say, had a
I
10
think they
acre.
would still need to
Wait a minute, yeah, I'm confused. What does that mean?
file those plans in the
They
registry.
don't have
of
to have an
deeds.
intent to actually execute those plans.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the mechanism that would be used. So effectively, you take your big lot, you run a line down the middle.
On paper.
You propose an A&R, and then you got 3 years.
Yes.
Okay, good. That's kind of how I thought it worked, but I wanted to
3 years
to hear it from the.
Now-
to get a
The
special
expert.
permit
So, but
issued?
and when you're gonna show an A&R, you've gotta show lots that have requisite frontage,
Right.
right? And if they're creating a lot that doesn't have the requisite frontage, theoretically, you could still endorse, if it's marked as not a buildable lot.
Right.
Or something along that nature. But-
Yeah, well, for the situations that are being anticipated here by this proposal, I think we're looking at reasonably large lots that would be subject to an A&R. Okay.
And again, that A&R only protects the use, it doesn't protect the dimensional requirements.
Right.
So if a landowner right now doesn't do a subdivision, and this got passed, but they already own the lot.
Yep.
And they would say they were coming down the road to build a warehouse, and this gets passed in the fall, gets approved by the AG.
Yep.
Right? They can't build it.
No, they can build a warehouse.
They can't build,
they can't build
something
Distribution.
that would become prohibited by this.
Okay.
Correct. If they have not achieved any sort of zoning freeze protection, and they have not received any permits that would grandfather them under Chapter 48, Section 6, then they're subject to the new bylaw and they can't go forward.
Okay.
And does that
At what
start
point
at the
do they
public
become
hearing?
subject to the new bylaw?
It starts as of the date that town meeting adopts. So if you look at the
All right.
last section of the handout,
Okay.
there's a provision in General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 5, which addresses zoning amendments. The effective date of the adoption or amendment of any zoning bylaw shall be the date on which such adoption or amendment was voted upon by town meeting.
So wait, what is the impact of the opening of the public hearing? You just said something earlier about.
So that goes to whether or not a particular proposal that it was either seeking a special permit or a building permit. If they don't have that special permit or building permit prior to the first publication of notice of the public hearing, that is not protected. So then the only way that they can get protected is by filing either a definitive subdivision plan or an A&R plan prior to the town meeting vote.
So if they,
What if we're in the process of, they're live right now in the process?
You can't stop that.
you can't stop that, they're already in the
Or-
process.
no,
Well, that depends on what you mean by the
Permit.
process.
They're already in public hearings. We
If
got
they're already
two
in public hearings,
But they don't have a
and the
permit.
first notice of the zoning change
Yes.
is,
And we're still in public
Submitted.
hearings.
then the new bylaw is applicable.
It is.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Really?
Yes.
Even though it's not approved yet from the town meeting.
Correct.
Once it's a public hearing.
Once it's a
Right, so
public hearing.
if you look at the language in 48,
Published,
Section
Not even
6,
taking place.
Yeah.
So,
except as hereinafter provided.
So wouldn't that be, I mean, I'm not trying to defend anybody or not here, but isn't that a little unfair to an applicant who's in the system, right?
No,
And-
they
and then
just
you
said
get-
to
and
us,
then you
you've
get a
got 10 years to
citizen
do
petition.
it, get on it.
A citizen petition comes up, comes through the public hearing, boom, their plans are dead.
Yes, I mean, at
So
the end of,
that's legal.
at the end of
That's
the,
legal.
yes, so let me read the provision of 48, Section 6. Except as hereinafter provided, a zoning ordinance or bylaw shall not apply to structures or uses lawfully in existence or lawfully begun, okay, which in this instance would not have happened, or to a building or special permit issued before the first publication of notice of the public hearing on such ordinance or bylaw required by Section 5. So the date for protection pursuant to either a building permit or a special permit is whether you have obtained that prior to the first notice of public hearing. The date for the zoning freezes is the date that town meeting actually votes. So, I mean, it puts a property owner in the position of, potentially having to file
An A&R.
an A&R plan or a
So-
subdivision plan to try to
So what
protect
if we
themselves.
So, Paul, that sounds like you could have an application in process somebody doesn't like it and they come forward with a proposal to change the bylaw to prevent it, once that goes to public hearing,
Once it's
that-
published.
once it goes to a public hearing, whether or not it gets approved, that application is now off the books because you have this bylaw change.
It's not off the books until it's actually voted on, accepted by town meeting, and then ultimately approved by the
So if
Attorney General's office.
So if the
And it's
planning board
retroactive.
approves it before it goes to public meeting, to town meeting,
They could go in and
and
try to
it's
get a building permit
ultimately,
and have it denied.
and the bylaw change is ultimately approved by town meeting, that approval of the plan is now null and void?
Correct.
However,
Wow.
what they would simply do is they would file an A&R right away. That'd give them
Well-
3 years.
So how long do we have to publish our,
The
have to do it 2
the
weeks
ad is,
in.
the hearing is going to open on August 24th. It will be, the legal ad will be in the Lowell Sun on Wednesday, August 10th,
Can
and
we do
Wednesday,
it
August 17th.
oh, we would have had to do it today for the 10th?
The reason that I guess, did not proceed with posting the legal notice is that the purpose of this evening is to engage with the proponent. And the board may have initial questions, comments, concerns, in addition to hearing from counsel, that the proponent may want to revise if the board is considering or asking for revisions. Remember, at some point, the planning board is required to provide a recommendation in town meeting,
Right.
So, Paul,
okay?
Yes.
There are revisions that have to be made.
if a proposal, if we, planning board members, felt that this proposed warrant article needed to be edited, would that require the petitioner to then get another set of citizen approvals of that revised?
So once this gets
Article?
once this gets
We
into
can
the public
propose it.
hearing process, it can be revised.
And
Right.
we can propose it. It doesn't have to be, he brought it forth as a citizen proposal, but we can
Yeah,
propose
but
it.
so that would
But then it
require a
becomes an
new-
entirely new
Right.
article submitted by the planning board. This is a citizen
edit it.
proposal warrant article.
But-
So my
yeah.
question is, do you need a specific number of citizen signatures of what that warrant article is that's going to town meeting? Not of the nebulous thought of that or purpose of that article, but the actual article that's going to town meeting?
So-
Get
so-
it in
Or
30
can it
minutes.
be,
He needs 10 signatures. He could get them in half an hour.
oh, okay.
But that starts the clock over, and I don't think that would really be necessary. So again, when you're talking about an amendment to a proposed zoning change, same as any other town meeting warrant article, the question is whether or not that proposed amendment is within the scope
Yeah,
of what was
does it
initially
expand it or
advertised.
reduce it?
So as long as what these changes would be are within the scope of what, so if you're not looking to ban something else somewhere else, if you're not looking to change, to make it so that it's 5,000 square foot rather than 50,000 square foot, those sort of go above and beyond, and there may be people out there who would receive notice of this that didn't feel like they needed to come in and participate in the process. But if it changed along the way, then they would feel like they needed to participate in the process. So as long as it's within the scope of what was originally published, then,
This is
it's
fine
it's
right
fair
here.
game.
This is fine right here. What he has right here, we can start with this.
Correct.
And then amend it.
And you can make
So we
amendments to
can
try to.
amend this as
Yeah,
we go.
on the fly.
And so,
No.
I mean, I
The
didn't think you
petitioner
could.
has the legal right to bring the article to town meeting, regardless of what the planning board says or does. The purpose of this engagement, before the public hearing starts, is for the petitioner to present, for the board to ask questions, make sure that they understand it, engage with counsel. There may be board members who want it revised. That's your opportunity to express it to the petitioner. The petitioner may agree to revise At that point, it's a partnership. You're working towards trying to achieve an article that both the board and the petitioner can go to town meeting in unison and say, we're both in agreement. We're not here to debate.
And Evan is correct.
Yeah.
My comments before were presuming that the proponents of the warrant article would agree to any changes that are discussed during the course of any public hearing up to and at town meeting. But of course, they have the right to proceed on their warrant article as drafted if they so choose.
I think I'm not answering, for me, a couple of my comments for you, Paul, that we just had, was because we understand how this came about, and I just want, before I ask Christopher some changes or talk to him about some stuff, I just want, this is setting a very bad precedent for a group of people that are against a project, that this is the quickest thing that they can do. All credit to you, I think it's great, right, that you did
We
this.
still have to vote on it. The
No,
town's going to vote on it.
I understand that, but I just think it's knowing now what you just said, how they can come through and how you, and I really appreciate that backup, because I was under the impression too that I heard about the grandfather piece. I just think that it's going to set a very bad precedent for any development.
It was 2 years
stop all
ago,
development in
But I think we
town
need to-
meetings ago, when the fulfillment article came up. And I think there was enough backlash at that town meeting that planning board pulled it. And the fact that we haven't come up and done anything
No, I agree.
ahead of time, this is not only because of one section,
agree.
one
No, I
development in
remember that-
town. Right.
that meeting.
It's shame on us.
Festering, absolutely.
Right.
No, I totally
for
agree, and I
not
think it's about
addressing
time,
this.
and I agree. Well, I wanted to say thank you, because I thought it was great that we should do this. But I think this leads to a lot of discussions that I don't think everywhere in the IA this should be. This comes across IA 100% right across the entire town. And I think if you're taking it to this level, I think the planning board has to take it to the next level and to do an overlay somewhere in town. I don't think, I mean, you talk about the future, right? Look at the shopping plazas. They're all going to self-checkout. So what happens when in 10 years from now, there's no people that are working there, it's all robots? I mean, how do they get incorporated to this too? But I agree with you, the definitions are great. I think we need to modify that. I'm 100% on that. But I think we got to look at it around the town. I don't think it's one size fits all, and I don't think we should just wipe out one whole thing for distribution centers where maybe there's an area in town, maybe there's not.
Then we do an
But-
overlay, and we present that to town meeting.
In certain areas, and you present the overlay of.
But I
of the
think this is
piece.
personally, I think this is a good first step.
Oh, I think it's a very good step, but I
And
think
then-
that's
and then-
it's everything.
And then we take it, next step, if we see that demand of something changing, that's our role, right? That's the planning role.
Absolutely.
Right? Then we can take an overlay, or we can add a definition, or we can add a table. But at least this stops the detrimental type of businesses that I've been
Right.
hearing that citizens in this town, and not just in East Chelmsford, across the town, right? Because we also have IA in by Byam.
Yep.
We have it in all these spots. It stops that extra traffic, extra what we don't want, and then we can take a step back, and maybe next year we kind of refine it. And during our work sessions, we say, well, maybe, what about this, or what about that? But we have to start someplace, and since we're not starting it.
Could I just interject one thing? Part of the reason why I did bring this forward with all of IA included is because looking at that type of business and where that type of business is heading, I actually don't think it's good for anywhere in this town.
Okay.
So while I agree that there are some areas that might be better suited for that type of business, I think as I mentioned, where that type of business is heading with automation and the size and the amount of vehicle traffic that comes with, I don't think it's appropriate for any place in this town. So that's why I did propose that.
Question for Paul. This is basically attempting to control vehicle traffic by controlling the use inside the building. Do we have the ability to control vehicle traffic without addressing what goes on inside the building?
I think.
And I ask that because there are so many different permutations of use that we can't possibly capture the use models in these definitions and have anything that doesn't look like a sieve.
Well, maybe
And
let
the
number
real
of bays
problem
per
that we're dealing
density.
with here is the traffic problem, not what they're doing inside and how they're selling it, and, you know, is it internet sales or is it business to business or whatever. What we're dealing with here is a traffic issue, and we're dealing with a traffic issue across town.
No, my
Oh.
proposal is not just about traffic.
And your
It's about the-
proposal is because of automation and taking jobs away because of automation?
the types of jobs. These are lower paying warehouse jobs. And for the warehouses that do have increased automation, it's actually fewer jobs per square foot that's coming into this town for the size building. And so, as I mentioned in the I believe, second section, it's also about safety. We don't know the types of materials that are coming in and out of a lot of these distribution centers. So it's protecting our wetlands, our open space, it's protecting our jobs, safety. So traffic is part of it, but it's not the only thing.
You know, Chris, I made that same argument about preservation of good jobs when we were working our way through the Route 129 overlay. And because of that, we blocked it for a couple years that we probably shouldn't have blocked it. And my concern was that if we put commercial into our industrial area, if we replaced our industrial offices with strip malls, that we were losing the quality jobs. And what has happened in that time is we've lost all the jobs because those office jobs just aren't there anymore. People aren't working in the office. We need something to replace those office jobs in our industrial areas, particularly
It's called
129.
It's called biotech. You're right, because those are growing, like, let me tell you, my scientists have been going into the office every day of COVID, and they need bigger, larger lab space. And I think we've already had this discussion, right? Like, we have the data. I think Evan's been sending us, updates of Burlington, Bedford, Billerica picking up biotech.
Is it coming our way?
It will never come here.
No, it's an
And with a sore moratorium.
Yeah, no, I get that. I do get that,
The
Evan.
final nail in the coffin.
Yeah, it is.
The reason
Our
I
office
was.
spaces
You're
just
saying that
aren't
then you're
aren't
making-
of use anymore.
So this is,
So something has to go in there.
there's your planning hats and then your regulatory hats.
right.
This discussion's blending
Yeah.
both.
Absolutely.
And it has to.
And I think we can all agree, including myself, that there are heavy truck-intensive uses that the community does not need or want.
And we don't want it.
Where I get concerned is, where do you draw that line, understanding and acknowledging the realities, the economic realities related to 129? The more uses the town chooses to prohibit, started with marijuana. There was real demand for certain types of marijuana uses in 129. There's clearly a demand for warehouse distribution. If it's not this, what is it? And I don't mean that in a sense of the town, but if you don't leave the property owners with options, economically viable options, then what? So we've heard the gamut from, it's okay, keep the offices vacant. That's fine for some people. But eventually, that pain will surface economically for the town. It's not now, but it will be eventually if these office buildings, the ones that are currently vacant and the ones that will be vacant, have no viable use. So biotech, in my mind, maybe biopharma distribution, but no labs. I mean, that's completely off the table. They don't want to be here, they're not here, they're not looking here.
Well, there are certain kinds of facilities. Bio is much broader than you're describing. For example.
The toxic plant that we heard about earlier tonight, some could argue is a bio
Yeah.
facility.
On
a
the
life
other
science
hand,
facility.
I work in a bio facility down in Westford, which has manufacturing capability in it as well as R&D, and would fit quite nicely on 129 without any question. But I think I'm also reticent to limit a particular use categorically across the town. I can see the arguments for not having truck-intensive, transport-intensive things in certain parts of town, including parts that may already be IA. On the other hand, we actually have mechanisms that we have been discussing over the last 6 months to provide some limits there. But I think limiting something like this every place in town is a mistake. That's why I think the overlay idea that Mike over here is proposing may.
I suggested it.
Huh?
Suggested, not proposed.
Well, he suggested it, but I think it's a suggestion well worth some deeper consideration.
Could I
So one of
just
the
address a
things-
couple
Yeah.
things? Please bear in mind that I'm only asking for one use being limited.
Right.
Not all warehouses, not all facilities, not all
No, I
manufacturing.
recognize
just
that.
one type of use. And while there are theoretically other ways to restrict detrimental effects to the community, we have seen in practice that doesn't usually work. UPS is a shining example of how it hasn't been working. There's the Brick Kiln Road issue continues to be raised on Facebook, on other social media platforms, where trucks continually go down the wrong way from UPS, and UPS does nothing because they're contractors. So there are other ways on paper, yes, but in practice, those haven't proven to work very well.
I know I've had moments where solutions to that have come to mind. I don't know how seriously strong we can make traffic regulations, but you can always say no trucks allowed and the truck is confiscated if he's caught that way. You're doing that. That would be interesting. You do that once, and
get
nobody
fined.
would take a left turn coming out of UPS. Now, whether the state would let us get away with that one, I suspect not.
Probably not,
But it
no.
is not a state road, so we do have some control.
Paul, have you had a chance to review this? Is this, is there any,
Yeah.
from a legal perspective, are you comfortable with this going forward to town?
So from a legal perspective, there's nothing that prevents this from moving forward. There are questions as to the definitions of distribution center, the
Yeah.
definition of warehouse,
Yeah,
whether
they're not
there's,
clear.
whether they are concise enough, whether they actually have some overlap.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're going to wind up bringing in uses that weren't intended to be brought in. And I think, some of the
It's our
discussion that
current-
occurred earlier about sort of the way things are changing, such as supermarkets
Yeah.
that are going to more
Yeah.
automated,
Pea potting.
does that sort
No,
of,
that's retail. It's
No,
still
that's
retail anyways,
distribution.
I mean, that's the,
but People are, it's
Walmart's
retail.
doing
But it's
distribution.
No, I was just trying to express the point.
Lowe's
that-
is doing
retail.
distribution.
You're still going in and buying groceries.
I was just trying to express the point of.
so I agree with Paul. I think that that's stretching a little bit to think that we're going to get there with grocery stores anytime in the near future, although I still get annoyed when I have to check myself out.
Yeah, we all do.
Oh, yeah.
I never do.
I try not to.
And how many square feet is Stop and Shop?
I don't know.
Yeah.
65, I think.
All right, so.
Either-
but-
either
but it's
65 or
still, again,
85.
I think 50,000, again, there's Peapod in Acton, and they have this definition, right?
Well,
whether
but that would have,
That's different.
that predates
It
their
predates,
adoption.
it's
So it's
grandfathered.
pre-existing non-conforming, correct.
Grandfathered.
And
So
and
the
again, I
question is,
don't
what
think
can
that
you
we
not
were
put
at there
in?
yet.
Yeah.
But I was just, so that maybe was a little bit of an extreme example, but there are going to be uses that don't neatly fit into a
Not at all.
category that I don't know that we can, brainstorm all of those potential uses now.
Right, and we can address them and make change. I don't know. I mean, like, when we look at warehouse in our definition, in our zoning, I think that's pretty broad. A building used primarily for storage of goods and materials for distribution, but not for materials goods for distribution, but not for sale on the premises. I mean, that's pretty broad, right? Like, I think if anything, this is a little bit more specific, and you're never going to get anything. I mean, unless there's something like that you see that, like, you're like, oh, wait a minute, no, this can't go forward because it's a real problem. If you're saying that, like, there's nothing that you're.
So, again, I don't think that that's the case. I mean, if this went forward, got adopted by town meeting, more likely than not, the Attorney General's office is going to approve it, and it will be implemented.
And it becomes our headache to figure out what class of things
And, well,
fit
in the first
into,
instance, it becomes the
because-
zoning enforcement officer's
Yeah.
headache to
Yeah.
interpret.
And because there's so many holes between these definitions.
So, I mean, I do think if there is a way to actually spend some time trying to tighten up these definitions to try to make sure it's including what you want it to include and excluding what you want it to exclude, that would be time well spent.
All right.
That's on the proponent or on the planning board?
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's on the proponent, because the proponent can say, this is my proposal, I don't care what the planning board thinks, and their risk is that the planning board issues a negative recommendation, and potentially this doesn't get accepted at town meeting. I mean, I would presume that the proponent wants to work with the planning board to come to something that everybody can agree upon and that addresses unforeseen issues to the best extent possible. And nothing's ever going to cover every potential scenario. But I do think digging in a little bit and trying to tighten things up would be a good idea if there's an appetite for that.
Can you see any suggestions that you would have for us for tightening things up?
I think that I would need to spend a little bit more time trying to.
I have just
Yeah,
some,
it needs worked.
I have just some like
It just
initial
needs work.
high-level thoughts on that. So,
I-
for example, I mean, as you wrote it, it's a one-size-fits-all when it comes to distribution.
Well, except for the 50,000.
Understood. But anything over. So did you give any consideration to distinguishing between, let's say, e-commerce fulfillment center distribution as opposed to a biopharma distribution center, or a business-to-business distribution center, or a business that's owned and operated, like let's say you had a local lumber yard that happened to want a distribution center more than 50,000 square feet. The reason I'm asking that is that those different uses have different truck intensities. And so maybe that's something that isn't, a total ban, but that's, so I'm asking, to what extent and degree did you give that any thought or consideration?
I did consider that. The concern I have is that there are so many potential uses.
Yeah.
I would see that that's almost an impossible task. I would rather consider distribution as a primary business rather than which type of distribution. Because I can't imagine thinking up, especially if we're trying to be forward-thinking, I can't imagine thinking up all the potential.
So I agree with you, it's a difficult task.
Yeah.
But that's, in my mind, that's the beauty of the major business complex special permit.
Right.
That's right.
Is that the zoning bylaw doesn't need to, we don't need to go through the frustrations of trying to figure out any and all what-if scenarios.
But
Your-
we're
your- your
subject
pro- Your
to
proposal
Judge
takes that frustration away at face value. But as Paul is indicating, it puts that frustration front and center with the zoning officer. And then every time someone proposes a warehouse, and they try to make that case to Jose, the building commissioner, my guess is 9 times out of 10, it's going to be challenged. So there's a couple ways to look at it. The current zoning, and I think Paul can attest to this, and the planning board should be able to as well, the major business complex provides all the legal protection that the town would ever want and the board would want.
I disagree.
I totally disagree. And I'd rather have the burden be on us than on the citizens of this town that have to fight this all the time.
That
And
would
I
be the
think
major
that's
business
why-
complex, because if you.
No.
This is
You
coming
get- Then you
forward.
got 270 Bill Ricca and Doug DeShane, we're gonna build it completely by right.
And some of the board members seem to be okay with that. I'm just saying. My point is that if this passes,
Let's just send it to the
none of
town.
this goes to the planning board.
Yeah.
The building commissioner makes the determination. And we all know how this is going to play out. There will be
It's in Acton,
situations where
and
the building
It's not a problem
commissioner.
in Acton, so.
And if it
Well,
goes to
this
the
is my
building
final
commissioner,
comment. Just a-
if it goes to the building commissioner, the appeal then goes to the Board of Appeals, not
Yeah.
to the planning.
In
Not us.
Acton, they
So
don't
we
do,
don't see it.
they didn't do a total prohibition in Acton. They allow it in 3 zoning districts. So you took inspiration on the definitions, but Acton, apparently a community just like Chelmsford, found it 3 zoning districts where warehousing distribution was okay.
All right, so you want to put it in, so, okay, so
No, I
let's
don't-
go
I'm
through
just-
that.
I'm just
Do we
saying
want to put it in
if
across
we're
from
taking-
Byam?
Well,
Like-
That's
At the
why-
POA, though, is a good
That's why
spot
you
for
do
it.
That's why you have the major business complex
I
special
think
permit.
the major business complex mechanism exists, and that certainly can be used here. You could also do something like require that any traffic that goes to such a facility go out onto a state road. That pretty much limits you to 129, 110, and at 40
I
and
think you're gonna need to
27.
be more clear than that.
You have
When
to,
say it
you'd
goes
have to
out,
work
they have
that definition.
Directly?
Yeah.
Out
Yeah,
to-
directly.
Yeah, you can't
Directly.
leave the facility and not go onto a state road.
Frontage on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it must have frontage
All right,
on.
so let's.
It's an interesting
Yeah, it's
idea. I
just-
throw it out as a proposal to
How does
chew
that
on.
prevent traffic going up Golden Cove? Because I was in
That it
Westford,
doesn't.
and
Yeah.
I put in 270 Bill Ricca Road, and it wasn't even traffic, and I was on 495. You
Oh.
know where it took me to get off?
Well,
It told me to go
on
off of
on
110,
Golden Cove
take
Road,
right,
because it is not a state road, we could simply ban truck traffic on it.
And who's going to enforce that?
No, we
We can't?
can't. I thought it was.
We already tried that.
I've gone down that road
Okay,
previously.
well, if there
Pivoted.
has to be a way to get to where
Correct.
you're going. But the state roads, if you look at the state road setup in town, it takes you to all it takes you to all the points you would need to get to.
But it, but-
For-
but- so
for
I was
major
in, so
transport.
then I did a second
Yeah.
test, and I did this during traffic, and I actually have pictures
Mm-hmm.
from Renick Road where you can clearly see the interchange between Route 3 and 495 and all the track backed up. And I was in the parking lot for 270 Bill Ricca Road, and I put WPI. Do
Yep.
you know which way it told me to turn?
Probably took you down, yeah.
Golden Cove Road.
Yeah, but
to take it on
that
at
doesn't
110.
say that we can't
Because it
ban
was-
it.
Even though it's shorter to go left
Yeah.
and get on Route 3, I saved 10 minutes by
Yeah, that's
going
right.
right.
I've run into
during
that
traffic.
situation, I don't
Absolutely
know how many
right, because
times.
that-
We all have.
So
That
even though
interchange is so bad.
129 is this ideal location for all of this distribution center, that may not be what the people in this town want.
It may
So
not
why don't
be.
we put this and send it to town meeting and let them vote for it? Then we end the discussion.
Can I just make a couple other points? My issue with the major business complex is that every time a new business like this wants to come up, the residents are going to have to mobilize and fight against it. I don't think that that is the right way to go. The residents, if the residents,
It's like the Oscars, they play
Guess
the
my
music.
time's up.
Yeah.
if the residents, in my mind, if the residents don't want this, then it'll be defeated at town meeting.
Exactly.
If the residents want it, it'll be accepted at town meeting.
Okay.
Fine.
I am open to making minor adjustments. I am open to making sure it's clarified. But I would rather not leave it up to other means that have already been tested in town, because those haven't been working.
Chris?
Are you open to a mechanism that does not completely ban these
Yeah.
things in town?
Could we make
So-
it a little bit bigger and then say, and there has to be a certain number of bays per density? Like maybe you could go up to 60,000 or 70,000 as long as you only had X number of bays per acre or something like that, so
So
that.
my concern
That's-
with the bays
Point.
is that, as the traffic consultants pointed out in the first meeting, I mentioned this, bays is only one of the aspects of use.
Little trucks, yeah.
So it includes the square footage, it includes the bays, it includes the actual use inside. That, all of those pieces go towards determining the traffic code and the impact. So while limiting bays to a handful or two is great, that still may not limit the actual use and the impact. You may just have more trucks backing up, or shifting the hours of operation won't actually limit the traffic, it'll just shift the traffic to different hours. So those are my concerns with those types of restrictions, is that it's not actually limiting the use and the impact, it's just kicking the can down the
Moving
road.
things around.
Chris, I really would like to see some edits to this. The edits that I'd like to see, under warehouse, remove the clause, a personal self-storage facility or mini warehouse. The reason I'd like to see that removed is we have a separate definition for self-storage units. We have a separate use chart line for self-storage units. And they just don't need to be in here, and having it there makes it confusing as to whether you're prohibiting them or permitting them.
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. The second thing that I'd like to see in the second article is to create 3 definitions. Distribution center small, distribution center medium, and distribution center large. I'd like to keep this definition for distribution center large. I would like a distribution center small to be under 25,000 square feet, and a distribution center medium to be in between there.
So 25 to 50?
Yeah,
And what do you want
25 to
do with
50.
the 25 and the
25.
25
I'll
to
get
50?
into that in the third article. In the third article, I'd like to see 4 lines addressed. Distribution center, small, medium, and large, and transport center.
Transport center is only allowed in IS.
Yeah, if you're going to prohibit a distribution center, you're going to prohibit a transport center.
Transport center is only allowed in IS, though, not in IA.
And you can't put it in IS, so just,
So we don't allow it now. So
that's my point.
So why do we, why,
Acknowledge that it doesn't exist.
But we
All right, so just to take that one aside,
Just-
so the other two, the other
So
three.
the other
Where are you
three,
going with that?
the other 3, I would like to see medium permitted in IA, and small permitted in IA and CC.
By right, or with just planning board special, with PB,
I'm good with special permit
for both of those?
for both of those.
Can you remind me what CC is?
Shopping center.
Shopping center, Walmart.
So that would be
Walmart,
the
So is
medium?
that allowed now?
Walmart, no, that's the point.
It's not allowed now, so why don't the planning board come up with their,
So
So the problem is.
the article as proposed, I think, would allow distribution centers under 50,000 square feet in any zoning district.
I don't get that out of this.
No, I
And
didn't get
that's
that
what's,
either.
that's the problem with what the problem I'm having with this proposal is
Needs to be
that
tightened.
Well, if you're
because
defining it
Paul,
as-
just a minute, please.
Over 50.
The problem I'm having is the distribution center definition specifically talks about selling to retail stores and other market outlets or directly to the consumer via telephone or internet remote sales. That is not in any way addressed under warehouse. So it leaves this big gap.
Right.
Okay? I don't want the gap, the definition, the big hole in the wall of not having any definition of what's permitted for distribution centers under 50,000 square feet. I want it defined. I want it defined for Jose, I want it defined for us, I want it defined for the applicants.
What was your intent?
It was to allow those types of small distribution centers, like a Stop and Shop, in the first article as considered a warehouse.
Even in the IA?
Yeah.
Yeah, but if they call it a distribution center under your
No, if you go back to
Article 3,
Article, if you go back to Article
Yeah,
1.
that's the problem.
Article 3 wipes out everything.
Article 3 wipes them all
Definition is
out.
Over 50,000.
So,
But to Paul's point,
Because it doesn't define,
to Paul's point, the way that would legally be interpreted, anything less than 50,000 square feet, by definition, is not a distribution
It's not a
center.
distribution center.
so it's allowed as a
Even in-
warehouse.
Even in,
That's what it says.
no, it's allowed as a distribution center.
no,
Yeah.
Because you're not, because under 50.
now it's not defined and therefore it's not
Not a
permitted.
distribution center. So that's why we're asking, what was your intent?
My intent was to allow those.
Distribution
A
center.
distribution center at 49,000 square feet in the IA.
If it's not, if it is not primarily intended, if the primary business function is not a distribution center.
How are you interpreting it?
See, that's not what it says.
Yeah, the
It's just not
way
saying
the
that.
way the article reads, it doesn't include a distribution center below 50,000 square feet as part of that
As
definition.
anything.
Right.
Meaning,
There
that's your
anything.
starting point. If you're over it, you're a
Just gotta
distribution
un-
center.
they're
If
not
you're under,
defined.
If you're under 50,000 square feet, you're
what
not a
you're trying to say
distribution
is that
center.
by
I don't know if that
definition,
makes you a
if you're
warehouse
under,
still.
you consider it a
That's my
warehouse.
problem.
My intent was to consider that a warehouse and allowed.
So I think Nancy's point is well taken, and she's proposing a very good solution, which is to identify the different sizes. and
Define them,
Define them.
permit
and
them.
Permit them, right.
Sure.
And prohibit them.
Or prohibit them, but make it explicit as to what it is, because right now, a distribution center is only something over 50,000 square feet, but if it meets all of those requirements, it's no longer a warehouse, and it's no longer permitted by anything, so therefore it's prohibited. So you're effectively preventing distribution centers over 50,000 square feet explicitly and preventing distribution centers under 50,000 square feet implicitly. And I don't want to see you do that.
I'm not,
Okay.
that I'm not following, but.
I think I understand where you're going with it, and I
It's
do
an
need to
easy
sit down.
fix.
I do need to sit down and consider it,
Yeah.
just looking through it,
it's-
but I think it sounds reasonable.
Nance, you're saying that the small would be allowed in IA, the medium would be allowed in IA and CC?
No, I said the other way around.
Oh, the
The other
small
way
would be
around.
allowed in CC or IA?
Yeah,
And the medium would be allowed just in IA?
and you might want to.
Large would be
yeah.
prohibited everywhere?
Yeah, and you might want to look at the small in other commercial areas as well, because the fact is, that's where business is going.
So do we?
You know, it is,
Well, I mean, the hitch here is
design
in
development
Article
testing.
1, but not a distribution center as defined in. All right, you go down there, and a distribution center is defined as larger than 50,000 square
Well,
feet.
then we're going to take
So
that
if
out
it's
and make a
not-
small,
Gonna
medium,
fix
large
that, it sounds like.
category.
well, then a warehouse needs to include the verbiage that it sells goods to retail stores and other markets or directly to the consumer via telephone or internet sales. And I don't think that's what a
Okay, yeah,
warehouse is.
And that's a good point. That's a
I
good
don't think
point.
that's what a warehouse is. The whole point of a warehouse is that it is storing goods as opposed to
Okay.
I think,
selling goods.
yeah, I think that sounds reasonable. I'll have to look at the details and
Could you-
figure out
could
how
you
I'm going
please?
to word it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that goes to my original intent of allowing the under 50,000s, whether it's through a small distribution center allowance or warehouse definition, it doesn't matter to me.
Could've come about a long time ago.
And prohibiting the bigger ones.
Yeah, and, I mean, what you're trying to prohibit is all the major truck traffic that
And
comes out of this.
would you be
Passed.
open to making those small and medium permitted by special permit only?
I'm good with that. I mean, I would much rather we
Well,
reviewed it
the
and
me-
looked
the-
at traffic
The medium's gonna
issues and-
fall under a major business
That's
anyway,
right.
which is at 20,000.
Yeah,
So that's gonna be a special permit no matter what you do.
that's right.
Yeah, but you make a
The small
special
one could be
permit
special
for.
The small one could be special.
Could be if it was between 20 and 25,000, or we could simply
Or
define
less.
it that way.
Yeah.
If less,
Yeah.
but we
So-
have to define it that way.
Because it is a traffic any distribution activity has the potential to be a traffic impact source. I believe it should be a special permit to evaluate the impacts of that traffic.
So,
That's
Well,
my
we
gut
have that
feel.
now. That's what a major business.
Yeah,
Not for
but
less
if
than
it's under
25.
20,000, you wouldn't be doing it,
Right.
and maybe we should.
Right.
But, yeah, that's my thought.
So my next question, though, is the transport center. Would that go above and beyond the scope of my original?
That's a Paul question.
That would, but we haven't published notice yet. You can
Okay.
go beyond the scope until notice is published.
Okay.
Okay.
But the
I mean,
transport.
would you have to go get more signatures and refile this by August 1st? Considering today's the 27th, like, is that, like,
Transport center.
Let me see.
But the transport center is
page.
already
defined?
and regulated.
Yeah, it's-
Yeah.
It's only allowed in the IS.
Transport terminal.
What Nancy's asking is to change the special permit in the IS to an N,
Yeah.
and then just capture it in this use table. The IS land
That's all I'm.
that is in town is all owned by the town. It's Oak Hill.
Yeah.
So you just
Yeah.
like.
So it's really irrelevant
So that-
anyhow.
Pointless.
Right, yeah.
Then
So,
have the-
I mean, if you want to do that in the future, you
Okay.
can.
Yeah, I would have the planning board present that.
I would rather not include it in this
That's
if,
okay.
if it would complicate
That,
things.
that's okay. In that it's only IS, it really doesn't matter.
So I got a question. I'm looking at the retail definition. So retail, we have defined. And it says, it's on, I don't know what page it's on.
Transport?
Let's see what you were just looking at.
And it says the term includes electronic sales of all kind. So are we going to be double,
150.
if we add it into this warehouse?
The intent there, and I mentioned this when we were doing the e-commerce, is that if you had retail zoning, shopping centers, retail zoning, and you had Walmart or Stop and Shop or Market Basket wanted to convert part of their store to fulfillment,
Fulfillment.
retail currently allows that.
Which we should.
Yeah, well, that wasn't the sense at the time.
I think there's some sensitivity as to whether Stop and Shop can convert 50,000 square feet or more to
Yeah.
distribution.
50.
50.
Well, they could.
But currently, under that retail
unreasonable.
definition, they can convert it to e-commerce fulfillment. How they distribute it is a little foggy under current zoning.
So, okay, let me just take a step back. So like Walmart, that's bigger than 50,000 square feet, right, in Drumheller?
Yes.
They could decide, we're just going to do fulfillment. Like, you just come.
So we don't define the term. They can do retail. So some e-commerce retail is where.
You drive up and you pick up your stuff.
Exactly, exactly.
They do it now.
Or you use small vans. We talked about that. There's nothing in current zoning under retail, package stores, laundry facilities, the butchery, where they have a home delivery service. That's distribution. But I think part of the gray area with this is, some people may be okay with small vans, but not too many small vans, and some people are not okay with trucks, or UPS box-sized trucks. That's the gray area with all of this. But currently, any retailer, under this definition, can do e-commerce and distribute.
But if this passes, say for instance Walmart.
Agreed.
If this passes, they would not be able to.
Exceed the small, medium without the special permit.
Okay.
So for people who are
capture that.
concerned about increased distribution via vans, trucks, Nan's proposal, starting with your proposal, would further regulate that.
Okay.
All right, are we at a point where the sensible thing to do is for everybody to retreat to their desk and look at possible wording changes.
Sure.
And I think that applies both to you and to the planning board, or the members of the planning board. And
Let me just ask Paul,
Yeah.
if the first legal ad is going to appear in the Lowell Sun on August 10th, if I understand correctly, that simultaneously, I'm supposed to provide a draft to the town clerk. Okay. So I think if I understand this, as long as, if you're going to contemplate revisions, as long as you can maybe email them out.
Yeah, I can
We're
do
not,
that
unless you're going to meet
by Friday.
again between now and.
No.
no, I don't think we're planning on that.
Okay, so I guess it's in your hands.
I
It's
can
kinda
do
what
that
I'm-
by Friday.
Okay.
I mean, we could, no, never mind.
No, we've given him feedback. You can go watch the video. And
Okay. So as long as I have, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, as long as I have the petitioner's next iteration, it may be the same as this, it may be slightly different, by August 10th, once that first legal ad goes in, that's the official
Correct.
proposal of record. Okay.
And again, that can still be further amended as you
Yeah.
go through the
As
process,
long
as
as
it's within scope.
reduced, not expanded in scope. yeah.
Correct.
because then he would have to go in front of the select board. They would make a recommendation, and FinCom would make a recommendation, right? So any one of them could provide other input.
Further clarification.
Yeah.
But we haven't voted on it either. We won't vote until after the
That's right.
public hearing, right?
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
But regardless.
But we could further
It
amend
still has
it
to
if it
go
came up
through
and
all
we
those
needed to
boards.
Yeah, but
before
it's
we
all
vote
locked
on
in,
it.
though. It doesn't change after
The
that.
proponent
He does.
can further amend
Yeah,
it.
we're
because
just gonna give our
citizen
opinion.
petition.
Not ours.
Can he amend it at the floor, or can he amend it before the
Anyone
meeting?
can amend it once it's on the floor.
No, but does
Yeah,
he
but
have
it's
to?
not recommended.
I could accept a friendly amendment,
So confused.
but I would hope that any changes that you guys would
Town
want.
Oh, I think
Done.
Nancy captured a lot of us.
Yeah.
Mine.
Yeah.
I mean,
I thought it was great.
yeah.
Are there any other concerns or changes?
Nope.
I think that's a pretty good start.
I thank you for,
Thank
Oh,
you.
thanks for bringing it
Yeah.
and taking the lead.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Interesting
Thank you
stuff.
for your time.
And you'd be great on
Hey,
this board, you
Thank-
know.
thank you.
Way.
No, thank you.
Would that be a conflict for related?
Chicken.
That's, so what?
So I know it's a little late,
Oh, maybe
Yeah.
we can convince him.
but we have council here. We also, on the agenda, had a general work session.
Yeah.
So if the board wants to take some minutes to ask Paul any of the legal questions, if you recall from our last work session, we had questions
Yeah,
about
I think that would make
jurisdiction,
some sense.
special permit authority, how do you treat a by right use under the use table, but it has a major business complex special permit?
Paul, can you come to the work session? Because I do have a lot. Because one of them, you mentioned something in the prior planning board that, like, I just don't want to go into hours here now.
Right.
Will you be there?
Well, we haven't
or
scheduled one.
could you zoom in?
Oh, we did, August 24th.
Can you zoom in?
Or I can be there. August 24th, is that what you said?
But I think it might
No, our work
behoove us to
session,
get,
isn't it August
to
10th?
get some of the
No.
specific legal questions written down.
Sure. Like, I can give you the, like,
Yeah, it's
no,
definitely
I,
always helpful to get the questions.
one of them was what you brought up.
Whatever legal research
I
is
have a
necessary.
few.
More efficient.
August 24th, NIMCOG is scheduled to come in.
Okay.
So again, if, that can take 2 hours in and of itself, but if we're going to have Paul in, maybe it's an hour each.
Okay.
We'll figure that
Yeah.
out.
Well, let's see what we gather up for questions, and then maybe we can deal with those depending on how many we've got.
So one of the other things and one of the reasons that we had NEMCOG coming in one of the main zoning changes that I thought needed to be looked at is luckily being brought to us by a citizen. But I wanted to actually have us look at the problem zoning areas in time to actually do something for fall town meeting. If we're not getting NEMCOG here till August 24th, I guess that's,
Won't happen.
won't happen.
It's already too late.
But we can continue to push forward for the next one.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we should be thinking towards, putting together warrant articles pertaining to zoning for the spring. at this, you know, in the next couple months, so that we're not banging up against it yet again, without making any progress.
My question for our work session, if you can go through, you know, when we look at the criteria for evaluating a project, like, touch upon either, like, all of them, and then, like, if there's any, because I think you brought up something at the 270 Billerica Road, I think toward the end, that kind of caught my attention. You said something to the effect that it's an office complex district, and
Compatibility with character.
Yes.
neighborhood
Compatibility of
Yes.
character with
yeah, so like
the
I kind of
surroundings. And.
Like, put the bays in the
and-
back.
and
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the comment was around, one of the criteria under special permits is compatibility with the neighborhood.
Yeah, so like that
And-
was kind of what I wanted, if you could just
and
kind
the-
of explain that.
The discussion that we had, it was the back and forth, and it was pretty brief, was that perhaps a distribution facility was not a compatible with an office building, office park neighborhood. That even though it was a permitted use, it was not a compatible use with the current use.
Okay.
All right? And I think Mike was the one that came back and said, no, if it's permitted, it's obviously compatible.
That's a little
So-
circular.
It is.
Well, it was kind of, but, I mean, it was two different opinions of compatibility.
Yeah. I mean, it's-
And,
in my view, is the town has said it's compatible
Yeah.
by giving it
And
blanket
in a couple
permit.
months, it
and
may,
I don't know
it
that
may
that's
solve that
really
problem.
true, because
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
still a major business
In a couple months, it
complex
may solve
change.
that problem.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
well, that's right, we
So,
will.
yeah.
But you could have any
Anything-
other
any
use.
use,
Yeah,
right,
could be
any
a
other
So
You
use.
could
I
have
mean-
any other use.
The way that I interpret and the way the courts have interpreted special permits is basically they're uses that are identified as uses that can be allowed in a particular zoning district, but they require additional oversight, and they require the planning board to, review certain criteria to make sure that they are appropriate in the places where they're being proposed.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the drawbacks of zoning just generally is you're sectioning areas off in rather, generally rather large chunks and saying, these are the uses that are allowed here, and these are the uses that are allowed there, when in fact, it might be better to take a more granular view, right? And look at each neighborhood and look at each street differently. And that's what the special permit
And
process
sometimes each
allows you
plot.
to do. So I do think that you can have a circumstance where the zoning bylaw has identified a use as appropriate for a particular overall zoning district, but not necessarily compatible in the street where it's located. So I do think that is, otherwise,
Legitimate.
if it were not something that was capable of being done, you're reading that whole compatibility part out of the zoning bylaw. By saying you can't, if it's a use that can be allowed by a special permit, it's automatically compatible, then the language about
And
compatibility is
the
superfluous.
town took a step further and did the major business complex,
Right.
which isn't even about the use. It says any commercial industrial use over 20,000 square feet
Needs a special
requires a special
Needs to be
permit
evaluated for
and
its
warrants
site.
further review beyond just a regular
And it
special permit.
specifies in
use.
particular
But
traffic
the-
and.
My point is, the town, you could call it belts and suspenders.
Yeah.
But the town somewhat acknowledges, just because you have a warehouse that's allowed by right on the use table, if it's over 20,000, it's a major business complex special permit.
And I think I have questions there about just what the scope is on the major business.
All right, so why don't, if you guys could
Yeah,
send.
and that's-
Yeah, so if we can
they're
talk
a little
about that
hard to
maybe in more
define.
What
detail,
does it
and like
mean
with
to be
examples
compatible?
would be great.
Yeah,
Well, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get you
No, I know.
specific,
Yeah.
case law
A
examples.
lot of them probably haven't been adjudicated
Right,
yet.
because, a lot of these things are very amorphous, right? It's not easy to identify. Is this use compatible to this neighborhood, but, this use is not
Well,
compatible to this neighborhood?
let's specifically talk about
the criteria.
major business complex and what additional limitations can be applied by the planning board in that particular situation. I think that's the most interesting chunk. I mean, the rest of it's all just pretty much standard.
One of the other items was the purpose and intent statements within overlays.
Yeah.
Again, these are high-level.
Yeah.
Right, and my experience, purpose and intent is not sufficient, yeah. You have to have specific provisions.
Yeah, maybe if you can give us like a lesson of like planning board law. Like,
So
on
I
this would be
have one
helpful.
for you that I
Have
think
you
we
gone to
talked about in the
the
working
training
session,
yet?
but regarding straw
The
polls.
state runs?
I've got a whole
If
bunch of
we-
them. Yes.
Should we suggest, or we have to wait till they ask for a straw poll? If the project is negatively received by the board early on, do we have to wait for them to ask for a straw poll, or can we suggest that you take a straw poll if they want to move forward?
You can suggest that at any point.
You can.
Certainly.
Okay.
Because, if you talk about it, say, with George Zaharoulis, he'll say, you should consider yourself a jury, and you listen to the whole case before you make a determination.
Well, so there's some validity to that in the sense that, at the end of the day, if there's an appeal taken of one of your decisions, the standard is whether, on a special permit, the standard is whether that decision was arbitrary and capricious or contrary to law. Okay? So if you have foreclosed an applicant from making arguments that theoretically would address concerns that you have raised, because you're saying, no, we think this is bad, we don't want this here, and you're all just gonna say no in a straw poll, I mean, that is a problem. On the other hand, if you feel like you have either heard all of the information necessary, or that you have identified a problem that is so intractable that there is no potential
Way
to
around it.
resolve
Like the
it,
height of a building.
sure.
Like it's not,
See,
not
but
approved, like
that's-
it's not-
Or
yeah.
safety.
Or traffic.
Yeah.
Or
Traffic,
traffic?
that's, yeah.
If you have identified an issue that is so intractable that it cannot be resolved, I don't think that it's doing anybody any good to continue forward with a hearing process that, has a predetermined outcome. But again, it's a delicate balance, because
Right.
you do have the obligation to give the applicant the ability to address all of your concerns and show how they're able to mitigate.
So that's part of what we talked about in the work session.
Yeah.
Is how and when does the board, now you say the board, not an individual on the board, how and when does the board go about expressing their concerns to the applicant during a public hearing? Some board members, I think, have a strategy where you're not obligated to say anything. You close the hearing and you make a decision. Other board members over the years have said, I don't feel comfortable doing that if I'm going to express my concerns and give the applicant the
Give the applicant the opportunity.
opportunity to try to come back and revise or address my concerns.
And it's not just giving the applicant the opportunity, because you're also giving yourselves the opportunity to actually review whatever, their comment or, mitigation measure
Or
is.
the data, yeah.
Because if you don't ask that question, they never answer it, and then it goes to an appeal, and on appeal, that's the reason, and the applicants, well, we've got the solution right here, but they never pointed this out, and they never asked us about it. That could be a basis for having your decision overturned.
It's worth, we'll put that on the work session. It's worth talking more about that.
Okay. Have we beat this one to death? I think so. Have we beat Paul to death?
I have a little,
We haven't eaten dinner
I
yet,
have a
so-
little old business I just wanted to ask about maybe it's not appropriate for now, but we had received an email from a butter today for the Glenview project.
Really?
Yeah, and I responded.
5965
It wasn't
Princeton
Glenview,
Street.
it was, 5965 Princeton Street.
Maybe this
It's,
morning.
I didn't see that.
Well, it was
yeah, I
a
was gonna ask
follow-up
that.
from
I
a
was gonna
previous
ask
one,
the
like
question.
4 months ago.
What's the process now to address that? Because that was,
Right, they're coming-
they asked us a couple months ago.
It's the same
thing.
process as every other project. Occupancy permits are not granted until the applicant requests me to go out and do a final inspection of the planning board decision and plans on the behalf of the planning board.
So they don't have a
That-
certificate yet? They're
No.
they're not in that building yet?
The new building, no.
No, okay.
No. And if and when they ask, I go out there, I review everything above ground.
Right. But this is on the other side of the existing building that they modified.
The existing building has never been vacated, it was always
But
occupied.
they repaired, they made repairs.
Yes,
But what the condition that the neighbor's talking about is on that side of the property.
yeah, they're talking about,
So it's not near the new property.
no, I understand, but the entire property was covered under your site plan approval.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's still.
So, part of the
on our
confusion
issue.
and frustration is that we don't determine the pacing of these projects. So things take longer, I'm not out there daily, I'm not micromanaging it, right? For all I know, they'll install the landscaping in the wrong location, I go out there and I have to make a determination.
I thought your email response was good, though.
Okay.
But I thought that was.
Oh, we have some
Okay.
minutes
for
to
anything
go
else?
through?
I think we're
Good.
all set with you. We have
Thanks,
two
Paul.
meeting minutes.
Thank you.
If
Very much,
people are
Paul.
prepared to just pass them, fine.
Yep.
Or we
Yeah.
can refer them to the next meeting. It matters not to me.
They're fine
A
to me.
typo on one? I thought I saw a typo. That's a chair. Didn't refer you to the chair as chair.
I didn't hear you.
I thought there was a typo on one, but I just.
If you want, then we can defer till next meeting.
defer to the next meeting.
These are recent enough that we're not in violation of anything by not passing them tonight.
In that
Okay.
case, I
Do
would
it.
like to take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I'll second
I
that.
would like to, everybody would like to
second
second
that.
that.
Done, we're out of here.
Aye.
Aye.
Good night.